Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Naruto Loved Raven. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. At long last, the ceiling had been completed. Minato gazed down at his son, his child, fighting to keep the smile on his face as blood seeped out of the corners of his mouth. His wife Kushina was in front of him, as they both had been pierced in the stomach protecting their son from one of the Kyubai's claws. His wife had been shedding tears for their progeny, his name stitched averse-lovingly into the blankets covering him. They could not, however, stifle his cries. Try as he might, Minato couldn't help but feel guilty at what he had done to his baby boy. He knew some people may dislike him, but he believed they would see him as the little hero he was. He had to, he must. To think otherwise was to die with regret, and that was something he dare not do. In a way, this killed two birds with one stone. By turning his son into a Jinchuriki, he protected his village with one hand, and with the other gave his son a power to fight against the masked man that had wrought this horrible fate. Then, something strange occurred. His son was surrounded by a strange light and disappeared. Just like that. There was no warning, no explanation for this sudden phenomenon. His son, and the blankets swaddling him on the altar, were suddenly gone in a burst of golden energy, leaving naught but empty air behind. Shock filled both parents' faces as they cried out for him, yet their bodies fell lifeless and listless before they could act, for their souls had gone to the Shinigami. Their last breath was their son's name, Naruto. The Kyuubi yelled at its new confines and slammed against its cage in anger. It too realized that something was wrong, and with every fiber of its being it fought to escape the strange fate befalling it. Jaws snapped at the bars of its cage, claws clanking harshly upon its prison. It suddenly felt its power being drained, just as its yin half had been. Though it roared as its chakra was ripped from it, its body becoming little more than a shriveled version of itself. Upon the bitter lock of its cage, a piece of paper with the kanji for seal on it vanished, only to be replaced by a spiral lock that closed around it, winding tightly shut. The large mass of chakra flew through the tiny boy's body and lit it a shining golden white. Celus Branwen was not a good man, nor could he be called an evil man at that. He simply was. Light and dark held no meaning for him. As leader of the Branwen Tribe, he was expected to show strength in nearly all things: strength of mind, strength of body, and of course, strength at arms. He'd fought his way to the top and killed the last chieftain many moons ago, and he had no doubt that someday he too would face the same fate. One day in the far-flung future he would die choking on his own blood as the next chieftain stepped over his corpse and claimed his title. It was the fate of everyone who dared to rule the tribe. Eventually, someone stronger would come along, and when they did, well, Celus didn't begrudge his future killer. On the contrary, he'd long since resolved to welcome them with open arms. This was the way of the world. The strong thrived, the weak perished. Some called it cruel. Perhaps it was and perhaps it wasn't. He didn't know. This was the way his father had taught him, and his father before him, and their father before them. In the tribe, strength meant everything. Only the strongest led and only the strongest prevailed. Strength got you first pick of the loot after a good raid. Strength brought you wine and partners aplenty. Strength gave you the richest of foods in spring and the warmest blankets come winter. Strength built your legend brick by bloody brick until your reputation was so fearsome that everyone whispered your name. It was strength and his own cunning that allowed him to survive as long as he had. There will always be challengers, of course, and there always would be, ever those seeking to usurp his position. Some of them might even be his own spawn, someday. Not a bad way to go, that. But that was the future. The present called to Celus now, as surely as the strange sight before him. A weathered hand ran through dark hair gone near silver as he squinted through the smoke. Blood-red eyes flashed in the waning moonlight, narrow and intent as they squinted down at the small bundle before him. Where did you come from? A quiet gurgle greeted him, sad and mewling. Celus sighed, talking to an infant. If only his men could see him now. No one had expected a babe to fall out of the sky in the dead of night and crash into their camp, least of all the explosion that followed his arrival. 3 of his men had died in the blast. 3 grown warriors, their bones now burned so badly that he barely recognized their bodies in the ashes. It beggared belief. A child falls from the sky and lays waste to all before him. That was how some of the old stories started. Long yarns that nattering hens like to tell their children around a roaring fire in blackest night. Fairy tales. And yet here he was, only a few days old, and already a killer, even if he didn't know it yet. This mewling newborn lay on the ground before Celus, wrapped in swaddling cloth. All around him the earth was pitted and scorched, yet there wasn't so much as a hair out of place on his head. No, it wasn't natural. Some might call it witchcraft or magic, or even a dust explosion. Stooping down, the chieftain frowned at the child. The child frowned back, squinting at him with tiny blue eyes. He didn't cry, didn't make a sound. You're not dead, are you? Celus muttered, prodding his cheek. Come on, now. Mistakes were made. With that simple poke the infant's thin veneer of calm shattered like so much glass. He started wailing. Celus jerked back with a hiss. Stop that. Incredibly, the boy complied. Well, he didn't think that would work. This was foolishness, he told himself. He shouldn't even be considering it in the first place. His woman had given birth only a moon ago. Twins. He hadn't gotten around to naming them yet, and they didn't need another mouth to feed. By all rights he should ignore this boy. Barring that, give him away. Whatever he was, wherever he had come from, whoever his parents had been, he had nothing of value to offer the tribe. If they took him in, he promised only to be a drain on their resources until he came of age. Assuming he lived that long at all. He was weak. Miracles aside, there was nothing to be gained by keeping him. And yet, something in his cold, black heart stirred. It wouldn't let him leave the boy alone. Perhaps that was a good thing. Celus was strong now, but he'd been weak once upon a time. Every scrap of strength he now held had come at great cost to him. In his youth he'd been a frail child like this one. Weak, useless. Back then he could barely lift a sword. Celus the Small, his tormentors had called him. Celus the Frail. Celus the Craven. Then he'd hit his growth spurt and left them spitting teeth. With it came a new host of titles. No longer was he Celus the Small. Now he was Celus the Savage. Celus the Clever. Celus the Red. He'd come from nothing and become something. Someone. These days, every huntsman in Mistral knew his name. Only the foolish or the grim dared face him in battle anymore, and these days those were few and far between. No one remembered the weakling he'd once been. Of course they didn't. He'd killed everyone who dared speak ill of him. He became strong through no merit but his own. Who was to say this boy couldn't do the same? Who was he to deny him a chance to prove himself someday if this lad had a semblance like that? Oh, how little he knew, then surely he'd go far. Idly, he noticed something stitched into the cloth wrapping him. Syllables. Words. Naruto, he rumbled, reading them. Strange name. Saves me the trouble of giving you one, I suppose. Celus didn't question it. He simply acted. Rough arms curled around the babe, plucked it off the ground and cradled it against his chest. He inspected the tiny creature with a keen eye. Small and pink. Not much to look at, he supposed. That could change, in time. Celus Branwen wasn't a good man. That much was true. But he wasn't a monster, either. There were lines he wouldn't cross, depths he'd never delve. This was one of them. He told himself he wasn't doing this for him. Perhaps his children would be challenged by this whelp someday. Perhaps it would give them reason to excel. Without warning, the babe bit him. Well, he tried. It didn't hurt, but Celus recoiled in surprise nonetheless, startled by it. Would you look at that, he laughed. Seems you've got some spirit after all. Suppose we'll keep you. He had no way of knowing that this boy was from another world. Would it have mattered if he did? Who could say? And the future took flight. Time passed. Years flowed like wind as the boy spent his life among the tribe. He learned their ways, their traditions, their customs. How to walk, how to talk, how to wield a weapon. Slowly but surely he grew in power until he began growing like a weed, both in height and strength. All the while, Celus watched him intently. Of course he did. He would allow for nothing less. He hadn't taken the boy in out of the goodness of his heart. The runt would be strong, or he would be cast out. That was the way of the tribe. Thus, he trained him as he trained his own offspring. Ruthlessly, he pitted them against one another, time and again, until they learned the ways of war. They were meant to be rivals, enemies, constantly seeking an edge over the other. Instead they became friends. Naruto never turned violent, never lashed out, never took pleasure in hurting others, never expressed any interest in learning how to reave or raid as Raven did, nor did he feel the need to constantly ask questions as Kuro often would. Rather, he focused wholeheartedly on his skills. He trained and trained and trained until he dropped. Then he trained ever more. He did not display any weakness beyond in this, and as such Celus felt no need to stamp down on it, nor did he think to curtail this strange focus. In their 10th year came the time for testing. All three of them. And what a test it was. Dodge, Bretts. A heavy black staff whirled down at Naruto's head like a thunderbolt. Sharp blue eyes widened not at the command, but the speed behind the weapon. Only 10 years old, and already he knew better than to take an attack like that head on. It wouldn't just break through aura but the bone behind it as well. He whirled away in a blur of blue on black to evade the initial strike, and when said staff split apart to bark an angry dust round in his face, he was prepared. Rather than make the mistake of tanking a shot like that, he dropped flat to the earth to duck and let the fire bullet arc howl harmlessly overhead past. Unfortunately, that meant it slammed right into Kuro's chest and sent him sprawling instead. Naruto winced as his partner cried out in pain. Bad luck, Kuro. What kind of semblance gave you such bad luck? Foresight was a vicious weapon, just like her master, and Celus was merciless in his assault. Even as Naruto spun upright, the chieftain was storming forward, quarterstaff whirling in his hands. Its spiked edge slammed at his head, only to meet steel instead. Of course it did. After all, Naruto had a weapon of his own. Everyone in the tribe did. Celus chuckled as he bore down with all his strength. Good. You managed to block this time. But now what will you do? Naruto grit his teeth and refused to speak. As far as blades went, prophecy was a decidedly lightweight weapon, a mass of ebony steel forged with honed edges and jagged tips. It wasn't meant for sustained clashes. His was a trick weapon, designed for ambush and surprise attacks. Even now he could feel it warping under the strain. Yanking his weapon back, he spun and cut out at the chief's legs. Celus swatted the strike aside with contemptuous ease and beckoned him forward with a knowing smirk. Naruto chased him with a snarl. They raged back and forth across the camp like hellcats, raging and striking with singular ferocity, until finally he saw his moment. A flick of his wrist and a press of a button near the hilt caused the barbed blade to split apart into serrated segments as it unfolded to become a corded whip with a biting edge. It lashed at the ground like an angry beast, forcing Celus forward to avoid its longer reach and deadly coils. Just as planned, another flick sent it swirling around his staff. Celus jolted in surprise. Naruto seized the moment and yanked with all his might, somehow managing to force the quarterstaff down to the ground. The moment it touched the dirt, he surged forward and stamped on it with all his might. Celus grunted in acknowledgement and struck out with a free hand, trying to gouge out his eye in recompense for this temerity. Naruto turned his head and let it glide off a whiskered cheek with a crackle of aura, then peeled a palm from Prophecy's hilt and ripped a knife from his belt. It burned through aura and found flesh. For the first time since their brawl had begun, Celus grunted in surprise and glared at the red stain spreading across his trousers. Red eyes narrowed in what might have been anger. Or pride. He wasn't sure. Impressive. He chuckled. Most impressive. But you've forgotten something. A sinking feeling opened in the pit of Naruto's stomach. And that is, I don't need my weapon to fight. You do. Blue eyes widened. Celus let go of his staff and the wayward Jinchuriki had all of an instant to comprehend his peril before a knee cracked into his jaw. His thoughts shattered like brittle glass and he dropped his weapon as he went spinning into the dirt. Celus didn't give him the chance to recover. A crushing kick drove the wind from his lungs and left him retching on the ground. You rely too much on that sword, boy. The admonishment stung his ring ears. Trust in your fists a little more. The elder Branwen tossed him prophecy and then stooped to reclaim his own tangled weapon. Raven dove him out of the corner of his eye, forcing him to turn and catch her blade instead, lest he lose a hand. A faint weight against Naruto's hunchback told him Kuro had also seen the opportunity for what it was and chosen to pounce. Bastard, using him as a springboard. Alas, the twins acted too rashly. Naruto heard foresight click ominously and hastily reverted prophecy to its sword form. When he looked up, he saw that weighty staff complete its transformation and change into a towering axe. Credit where it was due, Kuro fell back the moment he saw it. Naruto didn't much blame him. Bad times abounded whenever Celus utilized the mechasift function of his weapon. By now, the boys knew better than to strike recklessly, lest they caught by the explosion that followed. Raven didn't. She flew at Celus like a shrieking banshee, sword in hand. Naruto slapped a palm to his face. Raven, don't rush in, damn it. Celus saw her coming and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Even from this distance, Naruto saw the wind up coming. He knew what was next. He'd seen it time and time again. The elder Branwen didn't deign to dodge. There was no need. The moment Raven drew within striking distance, his axe blurred at her head with impossible speed. To her credit, the little girl yelped and frantically tried to brave her blade with the back of her hand in an attempt to block, but it availed her not. Raven's father smashed through her guard and sent her sailing backwards through the air much like her namesake. Mercifully, her flight proved a short-lived one. She struck the ground and bounced, once, twice, thrice, skipping and sliding across the camp like a flung stone. The moment her momentum abated, she scampered upright, bright eyes burning with bloodlusted glee. On someone so small, it proved a terrifying expression. No child should look so pleased by the promise of violence. Kuro sighed. She never learns, does she? Hey? Naruto coughed and wiped his mouth. You know how she is. He'll knock the stupid out of her sooner or later. Maybe. He earned a shrug for that, followed by a concerned look. You need to fight harder, though. He wrinkled his nose as he climbed to his feet. Don't want to hurt Uncle Celus too much. You just stabbed him. Eh? The blonde waved him away. I know he can take that much. The old man doesn't seem to share the sentiment. Kuro craned his neck as Raven hurtled back into the fray. You're gonna get hurt if you keep going like this. We shouldn't have to. He shook his head. The tribe needs to be better than this. It's not right, you know. The younger Branwen looked away and scratched his cheek. Don't say that too loudly. Why not? Naruto blinked. You won't tell. Sheesh, don't say it like that. See, this was why he liked Kuro. Kuro made sense. Kuro was his friend. Kuro was willing to listen. Kuro wouldn't rat him out for expressing his own private reservations. Yeah, he was rough around the edges, everyone in the tribe was, but at the end of the day Naruto considered him a good person. Raven was not. She was all fire and fury, fierce and wild, like spring itself. She'd been the first to walk, the first to fight, first to ask about joining Celus in a raid. First. That was all she cared about. Whenever she accomplished something they couldn't, she'd lord it over the two of them. Restraint, she didn't know the meaning of the word. She had to win every argument, every brawl, every fight, every everything. Even now, she raged against Celus like she was actually trying to kill him. Sometimes, she worried him. They'd grown up together, the three of them, and that attitude had only worsened with age. She claimed they were the same. That they, the three of them, were meant for this. Even their weapons forged by a kidnapped smith shared the same meaning. Omen, harbinger, prophecy. Honestly, he was beginning to sense a pattern here. No, probably wasn't important. Better go help her. Kuro drawled when Raven cried out. She's getting creamed out there. Naruto pouted. Or we could ignore her. Yeah, let's do that. His friend frowned. That's my sister out there. He got a black look. Your sister's a bitch. Kuro laughed. Sometimes, yeah. No 10-year-old should cuss such. But they weren't children. Not really. No, not anymore. Children didn't last long in the tribe. They'd never had a childhood. Some small, tiny part of him felt bad about that. This wasn't normal. They shouldn't live like this. But he knew better than to voice his concerns to anyone else. Kuro understood, but Raven would snitch on him the moment he opened his mouth. Daddy's girl, that one, and maybe that was alright. She needed some normality in her life. Speaking of which, they should probably help her. Picking himself up, Naruto snatched his weapon out of the dirt and stumbled after his best friend. Celus saw them coming, took one look at them, and shook his head. That's enough for today. You lot are in no shape to fight. Yuh. Raven lunged at him when he wasn't looking, and he casually swept her legs, sending her tumbling their way. Naruto caught her and she slapped his hand aside with a snarl. But I can still fight. No, but Celus snarled. I have no interest in batting about weaklings. You fought well today. Those keen red eyes roved across each of them in turn. Raven, those scarlet orbs found his daughter first. Your ferocity was admirable. You kept coming, even after your aura broke. That takes strength. And Raven preened under his words, a wide smile lighting her face. Naruto shook his head at the sight of it. Suicidal was what she'd been. Why praise that? Why tell someone to keep driving at their enemy until they died? He hated the idea of it. As if sensing his doubts, Celus rounded on him in the very next moment. However, it was Naruto who drew first blood. He cast his gaze to prophecy, still hanging limp in the boy's hand. He also thought to entangle my weapon and deprive me of it. He nearly succeeded. Take heed, strategy is better than tenacity. You do well to remember that, Raven. Raven sulked. Kuro. Quite suddenly, Kuro found himself the recipient of Celus's attention. Naruto saw the hope burn in his eyes. Do better. He saw it extinguished in the next instant. Celus Branwen had not a single word of praise for his son, and it showed on Kuro's face. Naruto clasped his shoulder and flashed what he hoped was an encouraging look his way in the hopes of raising his spirits. It didn't much out a word of praise for his son. Rest and recover, Celus instructed them. It was more a command than an admonishment. The three of you will join us in tomorrow's raid. Naruto sucked in a sharp breath through his teeth. Raven hissed in absolute triumph. Kuro's face went white. Seriously, are you questioning me? Celus rumbled. No, he grumbled. With that, their chief left them to it. Naruto took a moment to steady himself, catching his breath as he crouched in the dirt. His thoughts whirled out of control, refusing to obey him. A raid. He'd never been on one before. Celus had never expressed any such interest in taking them along, and he'd always managed to wriggle out of them before this. Why the sudden change he didn't know, didn't understand. It made him feel sick. He knew what a raid was, what it implied for them all. Raids meant violence, death. They'd attack an innocent village and then, a shadow fell over him. Trying to upstage me? Huh. Not now, Raven. A blue eye flashed over his shoulder in a rare moment of anger. I'm not in the mood. He knew what Raven was doing. She felt glutted on what she assumed to be a victory and the promise of a raid. A chance to prove herself. Yet at the same time, she found herself riled by the praise Celus had so freely given him. She'd been trying to hit him for years. She'd never succeeded. It must have burned to know there was one thing that she couldn't upstage him in. Was her pride that weak beneath all that bluster and bravado? He knew the truth. She was a scared little girl. Sure enough, she grabbed his shoulder. Then fight me. Nope. Why, there was no point in it. I don't want to fight. What's wrong? She jeered at him. Scared, afraid you'll lose. Nah, you're just too small. He waved her down. I'm afraid I might squish you. Raven's face turned a lovely shade of red. Her height had ever been a sore spot for her, a constant point of shame. Naruto stood at least a head taller than her, and Kuro wasn't far behind. Oh, she'd hit her growth spurt someday, but that day was not today, and the three of them knew it. Why, you, she sputtered incoherently. Take it back right now, you blonde bastard. In hindsight, Naruto knew he really should. There was nothing valuable to be gained from riling Raven like this, only misery. Raven, Kuro warned. Leave him be. No, if he won't fight properly, what good is he to us? He's weak. Raven laughed at him, and Naruto watched her hide her weakness behind a shield of false bravado. She was going to keep pushing this time. She wouldn't stop, all because she thought him weak, powerless. In her eyes, only the truly defenseless refused to fight. What did it matter if he was taller than her? Coward, she continued, spitting at his feet. You don't even have a family. Not really. Father's just taking pity on you. Something twitched in the back of Naruto's mind. He saw red. Take that back. It was the wrong thing to say, and she failed to realize her mistake until those kind blue eyes blazed red. That was her only warning before he surged upward and slammed his forehead into her chin. In hindsight, it was a good headbutt, one that smashed through her aura, turned her world white with stars, and nearly knocked her out on the spot. For all her bluster and bravado, Raven Branwen was only 10 years old. She wasn't yet the monster she'd become in the future. That headbutt knocked her right to the ground. She bounced once, eyes wide, before she skidded to a halt. Angry tears welled up in her wide red eyes. Naruto glowered down at her and shoved a fist beneath her chin, forcing her to be silent. Weak, huh? This weakling just knocked you on your ass. Kuro fell to the ground a moment later, but for a different reason. He was all but howling with laughter. Ha, he got you there. Needy Raven sniffled, angry tears welling up in her eyes. I'm telling. Naruto blew out an angry breath. Was it wrong to pity her? Maybe just a little. With a long suffering sigh, he climbed to his feet. Come on, short stack. Don't cry. Want a handicap? He stepped back and beckoned her forward, much as Celus had. Do I need to bend down so you can swing at me? Really? She eyed him warily. You'll fight me seriously, you're not kidding, no takebacks. She was just so damn adorable when she squirmed like that. We gonna fight or what? Sure enough, Raven took the bait hook, line, and sinker. She flew at him with a triumphant grin. Suffer me now. The raid would begin at dawn. Little Raven both knew and dreaded that terrible truth in equal measure. After all, she'd spent the better part of the evening preparing for that very sunrise. She'd sharpened her blade to a razor's edge and polished her armor until it glistened in the moonlight. She'd laid it out in her tent and checked the leather straps once, twice, thrice. Then she'd gone on to prepared poultices in case of injury, 9 in all. 3 for herself, 3 for Kuro, and 3 for Naruto, just in case. Come what may, she swore they'd be prepared. Yet the night was still young and remained restless. Securing the final poultice in her pack, the banditobe leaned back and wiped a bead of sweat from her brow to take stock in her work. Her hand trembled when she pulled it away, betraying her fear. She forced it into a fist and kept it that way until the tremors ceased altogether. Stop, damn it, she growled at her traitorous limb. You'll be fine. You trained for this. Raven told herself she wasn't afraid. No, never. Only weaklings felt fear. Fear was poison. Fear made you weak. Fear meant death. She feared nothing. Fear had been the end of her mother. She felt no such fear. She refused to die tomorrow. Conversely, she was determined to make sure Naruto and Kuro survived as well. Her mind whirled tree, and ensuring their survival cost her a night's sleep. Boss sleep, who needed sleep, not her. She held a strong bond with each of them, and could sense where they were at any given time when they were in danger, too. If push came to shove, she'd cut a portal to them and drag their asses out of the fire. If she blundered into an enemy she couldn't be beat by herself, they'd come pouring through any gate she opened. They'd gang up on any bastard who tried to take them out. We'll win. Raven chanted the words to herself as she began to pace back and forth in her tent. We have to win. Refusing wasn't an option. They'd be cut down on the spot. Nor was running away a valid choice. They were children. Where could they possibly go? Sometimes, Raven really hated her semblance. Her portals made her a glorified fast travel system, but only to those she knew and forged a bond with. Naruto, Kuro, father. With enough training, she might someday be able to open a portal whenever and where she wanted, but such a day was still far off. But one day, she liked that thought. Someone knocked at the flap of her tent. Buzz off, she snapped at them, and the sound ceased. Raven growled, allowing her mind to wander to more curious matters. As far as semblances went, Kuro had gotten the short end of the stick and been beaten with it. His semblance just brought plain all bad luck, for ally and enemy alike. She dreaded the thought of his evolving. She'd been on the receiving end of it once or twice already. Her brother was already a walking disaster, not through any fault of his own. The last thing he needed was a boost. His semblance might help them tomorrow, or it could damn them. There was no telling with him. Oddly enough, she found herself grateful that Naruto hadn't unlocked his yet. She suspected it would be a powerful thing, but it might prove just as dangerous. Did his personality count as a semblance? Nah, she dismissed with a shake of her head. That can't be it. Too simple. He'd been like that for as long as she could remember. A silver-tongued devil, rarely losing control of himself, ever able to talk his way out of trouble, easily bringing many around to his way of thinking. That couldn't be his semblance. But he must have won. Everyone with aura unlocked theirs, sooner or later. Maybe it had something to do with his eyes. They always turned red when he got angry, a deeper, darker shade of red, not like hers, but like blood, red and slitted, almost like a beast or a demon. Nope, not going there. Stop. Raven slapped her cheeks when her thoughts veered down a dark path filled with violence. She slapped them until her face was red and her eyes watered. It worked. She'd been rambling again. Had the news of the raid truly affected her this much? Her thoughts betrayed her yet again. Naruto was still grumbling about tomorrow, saying they weren't ready. Didn't he understand Celus wasn't being cruel? He was being merciful. He'd endured his first raid at 5, half their age. Where he'd gone untested, they had been given a chance to hone their skills, to work together, and in doing so forge a team. Father couldn't hold them back forever. Any longer than this, and the tribe would begin to question him. They'd say he had gone soft, or worse, become weak. Weakness didn't last long in the tribe. It would be fine, she told herself as she chewed on a fingernail. Because their target was weak, while the tribe was stronger than it had ever been. Only the strongest survived. Yeah, survival of the fittest. That was how it had to be. Are you asleep or something? Hike. Raven whipped around with a squeak as a crop of blonde hair poked into her tent mere inches from her face. Idiot, she flailed at him instead, tiny fists sliding harmlessly off his visage. Don't scare me like that. Well, would you look at that? A blonde brow rose. Yes, you're awake after all. Raven grabbed a nearby skillet and tried to bludgeon him with it. Hey, now not the face. Rather than retaliate, Naruto simply swayed out of the way with a laugh and stood up, denying her the satisfaction she so sought. The cast iron metal missed him by a country mile. Blast him, why did he have to be so freakishly tall? Moreover, why did she have to be so short? She was a growing girl, for crying out loud. Did you just come here to scare me? When it became clear that she wouldn't be able to hit him, she planted one hand on her hip instead. Or did you actually want something? You too decent in here. Kuro's head poked inside the tent. Mistakes were made. QROW. Raven rounded on her brother with a hiss. The skillet sailed up overhead and came down crashing with an ominous whistle. A decidedly Kuro-shaped impression was left behind as her sibling slumped to the floor. Why is it always me? Because I can't hit Naruto, she huffed. He's too quick. Heh. The whiskered youth flicked her a V-shape with his fingers. Guilty, come on, short stack. He wheedled at her. We can't sleep. Let's do something fun. Raven felt a rare vein pulse just above her right eye, pulsing in time with her heart. He really did press that button too much for his own good. She knew she was small now, but one day she would grow. One day she'd stand just as tall as them. No taller, she'd tower over them all. She swore it. Vengeance would be hers. Mwahaha. She's monologuing again, isn't she? Kuro sighed. Yup, Naruto said. Should we interrupt her, or? Probably not a good idea. The blonde whispered. She'll be stuck like this for a good couple of hours yet. Spar. Then the young Branwen suggested with a shrug. It's too late to do anything else. Sure, why not? Naruto slapped his back. Hope you don't mind eating dirt. Raven blinked, suddenly realizing both boys had run off without her. With an outraged cry, she raced after them. Wait for me, you dolts. A quick scuffle later left them, three of them dirty, yet feeling refreshed all the same. It hadn't even been a fight, really, not with the raid on the horizon, more a light exercise to clear their heads. It certainly cleared Raven's. Her body was pleasantly sore, and it served to drive away all those dark thoughts that had been clouding her mind. It left her in an almost bemused haze. This was nice. We'll watch each other's backs tomorrow. Yeah, Naruto asked as they made their way back to camp. We won't need to kill anyone if we're careful. Speak for yourself, soft touch. Raven snorted. At least I'm not soft in the head. He quipped right back. Heh. Kuro jabbed Raven with him below. He's got you there, sis. That had her howling at them all over again. They were still bickering as they picked their way back through the main camp. A fire awaited them in the center ring, and a cloaked figure as well. They crouched near the flames for warmth, back stooped and body hunched as they jabbed at the smoldering logs with a stray stick. Raven stiffened and squinted against the dim light, but her caution proved overwrought, for the stranger raised their head as the three of them drew near. Kuro hissed. Oh, bugger. Hello, dearies. Old Nan granted them a crooked grin, exposing rotten yellow teeth framed by a pale face and lanky black hair. Out sharpening your blades tonight, were ye? Good, good. Her head bobbed as the children exchanged a wary glance. Come, warm yourselves by the fire. There's plenty of room for the three of you. Sure, why not? Naruto shrugged and did just that, leaving the twins to follow. Raven really, truly didn't want to. But she knew better than to refuse the crone's invitation. No one slighted old Nan and lived to tell the tale. The last one, try the wise woman's patience, had died a gruesome death. Some said it was a curse, that she was a witch, that she could foretell the very future itself. Some said that old Nan was the one who was cursed, that she'd been beautiful before she offended the gods. Raven didn't know what to believe. There were more rumors about Nan than there were stars in the sky. But even Celus respected her, which meant they couldn't refuse the elder's invitation without making fools of themselves. Moreover, she couldn't show weakness here. So she plopped down on the first log she found, wearing a smile she didn't feel. Did you have need of us, elder? Stoke the fire for me, will you, dears? Nan tittered softly. These old bones of mine aren't quite up to it. Credit where it was due, Naruto and Kuro moved quickly. They'd always been good kids, always happy to help where they could. In less than a minute they gathered fresh kindling for the old crone and had the fire roaring high and bright once more. With the light from the fire, Raven noted that the woman's cloak was red. Red as blood. Red like her hair. Such good children. The elder cooed as she patted their heads. You deserve a reward. How about it, dears? You've a raid tomorrow, or so I've been told. Care to know your fortunes? No. Raven's chest swelled with pride. I already know mine. Do you now? Dark eyes squinted at her in the gloom. And what do you think you know, sweetling? I know I'll be rich, she said simply. I'll lead the tribe. Fame and fortune will be mine. All of Remnant will whisper my name in fear. Is that what you believe? Old Nan cackled, a raspy, phlegmy sound. Why not see for yourself? She gestured back to the fire. Why not see what the flames have to say? Fortune-telling. Raven watched the old crone hunch over the fire. Why, what does the future matter? Ah, the wizened old woman laughed at her. More than you would know, dear girl, more than you know. What say you? Behind her, Naruto and Kuro exchanged a nervous glance. I dunno. Done. Raven rose to the challenge readily, even as Naruto and Kuro exchanged an uneasy look behind her. What's wrong, chicken? She sneered at them. It's just nonsense, anyway, so let it be. The hag clapped her hands with a cackle. Let's start with your brother, shall we? The boy favored by ill luck and fate alike. She threw a hand towards the fire and flames flared, casting strange twisting shadows across their faces. Old Nan tugged up her cowl, shrouding her wrinkled visage in shadow. Hero Branwen. Her voice changed without warning, losing its dry rasp to become a soft, almost sensual purr. Long is the road you will walk, paved by hardship and despair. The years seemed to fall away from her with every word, but Raven dare not look away from the fire, lest she be caught. But at the end, you shall find what you seek. You think yourself cursed, but your curse shall save you time and time again. Lost not yourself in a drink and you shall have a daughter, a girl with silver eyes. Hey, Kuro jerked back as if he'd been scalded. Hush, boy, Nan snapped at him, though her eyes never once left the flames. I'm not done with you. Do not anger the man who walks with a cane yet does not limp. Beware the betrayer. Trust not he who claims to have the heart of a lion. She tilted her head a moment, considering. Slay the dragon. My vision darkens. I see no more. Riddles and vagaries. Raven muttered. How do we know any of this is true? Silence, girl. She flinched as those unfathomable orbs found hers once more. I see in you a coward, Raven Branwen. That hit a little too close to home. The time comes when you will be tested. Falter, and so too will your friends. A wizened hand patted her cheek, but it wasn't wizened anymore. It looked almost young. Bend, but do not break, little bird. She tried to peer beneath the hag's cowl, but found only shadows lurking there. Shadows, a pair of full lips that weren't at all wrinkled or wizened as they should be. Trust in the strength of your bonds, she intoned. You were born to do great things, Raven. Spread your wings and fly, my child. Soar. Those were her mother's words, spoken only to her. How did she know them? In time you shall have children of your own. More and more, old Nan didn't sound old at all, as if some other being were speaking through her. Your eldest will bear hair of spun gold and eyes of lilac. She will be a terror to her foes and a sister to her friends. She is here, yet not here. Lost, yet also found. Raven having kids now, it was Naruto's turn to scoff. No way, not a chance. She's too feisty. And then those white eyes found his. Naruto Uzumaki, she hissed. The boy cast through time. Uzumaki Raven blinked rapidly, curiosity piqued. Was that his last name? Can we not do this? Her companion gulped, raising his arms as if to ward off some unseen blow. I don't really want to know my future. You hold back the beast. Nan ignored him and bowled on. You should not be here, boy. Yet you are. Curious. Naruto looked like he might object to that, but the crone glowered him into silence, and so he went still once more. I sense great fear in you. You have anger, you have hate, but you don't use them. His face twisted and she laughed, sounding very much like a young woman. Yes, that's the way. Embrace your emotions. They are your strength. Naruto climbed to his feet. Enough. I don't need to hear this. The wise woman latched onto his wrist, shackling him in place before he could bolt. You will be betrayed 3 times by those you love. She hissed the words quickly, syllables blurring together as she gazed up at him. You will live for them, fight for them, bleed for them, but still they will seek to undo you at every turn. Seek the scorpion. Trust the girl who claims to be a good witch. Save the girl kissed by fire before she is touched by darkness. But beware the undying. Do not listen to the man with many eyes. Heed my words. Ignore them at your own peril. Naruto ripped his hand free and the seer sagged. The fire fades, she whispered. Your future grows dark. I can see no more. Hiro recovered first and sketched a weak bow. Thank you, Elder. You've given us a lot to think about. Be off with you now, children. The hag kept her hood up and didn't look at them. You have a busy day tomorrow. Leave an old woman to her rest. Shaken, they departed. After such a scathing tale, the trio found themselves restless once again. In the end, they congregated back at Raven's tent. There was nowhere else to go. Yes, we'll call it a night. Naruto was the first to find his voice. I'll see you guys in the morning. Raven latched onto his sleeve. Stay. It was just a word, little more than a whisper in the night, but it had Naruto folding like a house of cards all the same. They were each of them rattled, unnerved by the prophecy they'd been given. No one wanted to sleep alone. Not after hearing that. You'd have to be insane. Well, you heard her. Hiro managed a shrug he didn't seem feel, though she recognized the relief in his eyes all the same. He dragged out a spare cot and laid it beside hers. Naruto did the same, and together the 3 of them fashioned a crude bed of sorts, lying side by side. She couldn't remember the last time they'd done this. Raven nestled against Naruto's back and yawned cutely. If you look over here, I'll kill you. Yeah, I get it. She feigned a smile and yanked the covers over her body, trying to hide herself as much as her scattered thoughts. Betray him? No, never. Old Nan hadn't spoken of her. She'd simply said he'd be betrayed 3 times by those he cared for. Would it be soon some far-flung future? She wasn't sure. Just thinking of it left her antsy. Sleep came. Quickly. For once, it proved a dreamless one. Incredibly, none of them suffered nightmares that night. The dawn broke with tentative care. Thinning rays of sunlight peeked their head over the misty horizon, almost as if they were afraid to wake the sleepy little town below. All told, the town of Flint couldn't even be called a proper town. Really, its chief export was meat and furs, and it dealt in ale. Its gate was an old, rickety thing, pitted and worn by the years, manned by only a single pair of sleepy guards. And why shouldn't they be always silent? Always calm. Naruto knew that peace was about to come crashing their ears. Celus had all but kicked the 3 of them out of Raven's tent at first light. From there he'd led the warrior OS the tribe on a relentless march, driving them all on and on and on until their legs threatened to buckle beneath them. Those that fell behind were shown no mercy. Now, finally they were here and he couldn't breathe. Anxiety played a part in it to be sure, but it was mostly exhaustion that. The moment Celus called a halt, he crashed to the ground. Hiro joined him a moment later, soaked in sweat. Your old man's insane. He rasped at him. Is he trying to kill us? Dunno. The ill-fated Branwen croaked back. He's never been like this before. He doesn't mean to. Screw it. Raven slumped atop them. I'm fine, I just need a moment here. Hiro gurgled wordlessly and smacked his head against the cool, wet earth. Naruto was nearly tempted to join him. It was only the knowledge of what awaited them at Celus's hands that kept him from flopping about like a fish. For reasons they didn't understand, the chief was showing no mercy today. The stragglers had already been beaten and sent back to the tribe with their tails between their legs. They've received no spoils from the raid today, or any thereafter until they redeemed themselves. Ignoring the howling ache in his limbs, Naruto dragged himself upright and pulled the twins up with him. Everyone was watching them, waiting for any sign of weakness. He knew it. Hero knew it. Raven certainly did. Best not to give them any. And besides, Celus was moving again. With the tribe's strongest men and women at his back, the chief climbed atop a fallen log, and the better to be both seen and heard by those who followed him. He stood tall and strong, clad in dark leather armor, mighty weapon in hand as he gazed down at the lot of them. Blood-red eyes flicked over the three of them, saw them standing. His head inclined in a nod. Then his gaze swept back to the some 8 dozen tribesmen below. Warriors, he roared the word, arms spread wide as if to seize the very heavens themselves within his grasp. Today we raid. Countless boots stamped rose to greet his words. Today we claim what is rightfully ours. Today we conquer. The last bout was the loudest by far. It left Naruto's ears ringing. But first, he lowered his axe and the masses split like a great sea, revealing the three of them leaning on one another. Today, my children are blooded. Nearly 100 boots began to stomp out a rhythm. Today they join us as warriors. The crescendo reached a fever pitch as he spoke. The strong thrive, the weak die. Another cheer went up. Naruto's heart hammered in his chest like some terrible beast, drowning out all sense and thought, muting the world around him. He knew what was about to happen. He could see the village walls from here, and Celus was whipping everyone into a vicious frenzy of blood and anger. The raid was about to commence. He wanted to stop it. He had to stop it. But he couldn't. He didn't have enough power. He wasn't strong enough. This is wrong. He tried to hiss at Raven anyway. We shouldn't be doing this. Not now. She hissed at him. It's too late for second thoughts. Way too late. Hero grumbled, pointing. Look. Celus thrust his weapon into the air. Charge. A roaring, rolling thunder went up and the tribe surged forward, pushing the three of them along in the vanguard. Hero latched onto his jacket to avoid being swept away, and Raven grabbed at his hand, but the press of bodies proved too much and forced them apart almost immediately. Naruto cursed and whispered a prayer of safety for them. Move or be crushed. Such was the way of the tribe. He hoped they could hold their own, saying it was one thing, doing another. They reached the gates just as the alarm went up, the guards having taken notice at last. Too little, too late. Someone rushed him with a pitchfork from one side, and pickaxe the other, and the world fell away into a mad melee. One foe led to another. Time ceased to have any meaning. Reality went ignored as he fought. Naruto wasn't sure when or how Celus managed to force the gates open, only that they did, and suddenly were now within the town, surging onward. All the while, his mind raged. He did his best not to harm anyone he encountered. He really did. He kept his sword sheathed and struck out with disarming blows, using his elbows and legs whenever he could. His aim wasn't to maim or hurt anyone, but to knock the fight out of them. Knock them out, if he could. Anything was better than taking a life. He didn't want to cross that line. He didn't want to be a killer monster. A boy with blue eyes and blonde hair rushed him from an alley, swinging wildly as he spat condemnations. Naruto batted his blow away and struck out for his chest, only to be greeted by aura. His brief moment of surprise was nearly the end of him because the bastard took advantage of his hesitation and broke his nose. He tasted blood and reared back. Anger reared its ugly head as he caught a punch and shoved his adversary back before he could capitalize on the opening. Monster. He didn't want this. He didn't want any of it. If he refused to fight, he'd be killed. If he ran away, he'd be caught and killed. So would Raven. Hero, too. He didn't have a choice. Shut up. Barreling through the younger boy's clumsy offense with a howl, Naruto sidestepped an awkward bunch and rammed an open palm into his jaw. Aura or not, the boy felt it. When that didn't put him down, he struck again and again and again. He kept hitting him until the boy's eyes rolled back in his head until he collapsed like a sack of sad potatoes at his feet. Adrenaline fled, leaving him to balk down at his bloody hands. To see what he'd done. Naruto looked left. Naruto looked right. All around him the chaos of the raid continued to swirl. No one paid him any heed. Blue eyes flicked down to the boy at his feet, gazing at his bloodied face. Should he leave him here, it would be the smart thing to do. He didn't know this stranger anything. And yet a thorn pricked his heart and held him back. You can hate me for this later, he grumbled. Slinging him over his shoulder, he stalked to the first open door he could find and hid him in a closet. Then he locked the door. Striding out, he ducked away from the melee and slipped through an alley. Everyone was screaming. Bandits were laughing. His stomach roiled, and what little he'd eaten this morning threatened to come tumbling back up his throat. When a portal opened beside him, he nearly swung out of sheer instinct. There you are. Raven's head poked through, followed soon thereafter by the rest of her. Hero was only a heartbeat behind. You all right? They both had blood on them, and it wasn't their own. Had they killed? Hero saw the anger in his eyes. Easy there, Whiskers. Just calm down. Naruto bit down on a hysteric giggle and shook his head as he stepped back, uncaring as her eyes widened. Calm him. No, he wasn't, not at all. He wasn't prepared for this. All this blood, all this violence. It wasn't just pointless, it was cruel. These people had done nothing wrong. Celus had decreed their deaths anyway. Men, women, and children alike. He could see it in his mind's eye, and the sounds tore at him, cutting deeper than any blade. They were all suffering. He wanted it to stop, needed it to stop, someone, anyone. Huntress. A cry went up and Naruto's head snapped back just in time to see said crier land at their feet, him in a greasy red stain. Blood spattered his face and he wiped it away numbly, not quite registering what had happened. Fear hit him a moment later as he balked at the corpse. A Huntress here? That shouldn't be possible. This was meant to be a quick and easy raid. So then where was? He heard a building collapse before he saw her. Once he did, she was impossible to miss. A terror to behold, a burning demon clad in burning gold and black fabric. Fiery golden hair spilled over her shoulders and danced in some unseen breeze, while her face lay hidden behind a mask of red paint and white bonino. The red wasn't paint, he realized, but blood. She was covered in it, he realized, dripping with the blood of her enemies. Even from this distance he felt her eyes lock onto them. You bastards have some nerve, picking on the weak like this. Her words were a roar as she stormed forward. Let's see how you like it. Naruto backed away, and Kuro mirrored him. Why was she glowing like that? Was it a semblance he didn't know, and he didn't want to find out? Semblance or no, where she moved, bandits died in droves. She cut through them with ease, snapping bone like matchsticks. They were but nails to her, something to be pounded down. Her fists were the hammer. She was a golden meteor that fell upon the bandits without mercy, swirling and striking like a starving beast, uncaring of the numbers against her. Shit, Kuro backpedaled. Time to go, we're not ready for someone like her. Are you mad? Raven snarled. This is our chance to prove ourselves. We can't fight a Huntress, Ray. Only a few paces ahead of them, Celus lunged at said Huntress from the fog of war, only to fold over her fist as the woman struck him in the stomach. An ominous crack of bone swelled through the air before she spun and kicked him into a building. He did not rise again. Just like that, the tribe's strongest had fallen. The bandits wavered. The Huntress didn't stop. She smashed through them. Naruto lashed out blindly with his blade when she came for them. The woman caught it between her thumb and forefinger as though it were no more than a stick. Then she shattered it with a flick of her wrist, leaving him gawping at the ruined hilt in his hand. He swiped blindly at her with it and against all odds, managed to crack her mask. She made him pay for it dearly. Her hand shot up, seized him by the wrist and yanked. He felt something pop in his shoulder. Red eyes narrowed behind the polished porcelain as he cried out, boring into his own with terrifying intensity. Oh, what the hell? A soft, husky voice growled back at him. Are my eyes playing tricks on me or something? You're so damn tiny. Today's just getting weirder and weirder. Kuro lunged at her with a desperate cry and she sent him spinning into a wall with a lazy backhand. Stay down, she snapped at him. I mean it. Naruto tried to jump her when she was distracted, only for a golden gauntlet to lock around his throat and stop him dead in his tracks. Blazing eyes greeted him and he gurgled in surprise as he found himself lifted from the ground as the Huntress slammed a free fist into his torso. Breath burst from his lungs as pain rocketed up his ribs. He tried to move, to speak, to spit at her. Nothing came. A single punch was all it took to lay him low and leave him retching in the street. Leave. The word itself was power and he flinched beneath its weight. This village is under my protection. Get out of here while you still have your lives. Like hell, Raven dove at her with a shriek was summarily kicked aside like a harmless straw doll. Naruto watched, helplessly as she crashed through a window and struck the ground with an ominous crack. She didn't get back up again. Geez, the stranger blew out a sigh, her words muffled in the chaos. A lone lilac eye peeked out at them through the crack in her mask, narrow and intent. That didn't feel as good as I thought it would. She lowered her leg, considering Raven's still form. Even as a kid, she's a bloodthirsty little bitch. How you're not much better. Blue eyes flashed red. Don't talk about them like that. Naruto forced himself upright, only for his arm to betray him again, to buckle when he needed it most. What the devil was she on about? Was this the strength of a trained hunter? They hadn't stood a chance against her. No one had. It didn't sting. It humiliated him. He'd thought himself strong for his age, capable at the very least. This woman had run roughshod over the lot of them. Oh, you're still conscious. Her head swiveled toward him when he tried to move. That's good. Take your friends and retreat. What? You deaf or something? She planted a hand on her hip and cocked her head. I don't want to kill a bunch of kids. Already sounded the alarm, too. More hunters will come. Go. The woman nudged him with a boot when he didn't get up. Crawl back to your tribe and never come here again. Was it wrong that a part of him wanted to thank her she'd stopped the raid? Even now he could hear the rest of the tribe retreating. Those she hadn't cut down had turned tail and fled. He couldn't hear anyone screaming now, only the muted rush of rapidly receding boots. Was Celus somewhere among them even now, or had he fallen in battle? He doubted it. The old man was too stubborn to die. It still begged the question. He hung his head. Thanks. His words drew a blink from her. Why are you thanking me for I killed your friends? They weren't my friends. Naruto didn't dare say any more, for fear of being overheard. Not a chance. But one question persisted. Why was this woman letting them go? Who was she? He tried to ask. Who are? Nope. Don't feel like telling ya. She interrupted him harshly. Scoot. No. With a supreme effort of will, Naruto popped his shoulder back into place. He found Kuro doing the same, stumbling to his feet like a drunken sailor at last call. His friend recovered quickly enough. Raven did not. They had to dig her out of the rubble together, and even then Naruto found himself forced to stoop down just to gather her into his arms. Her head lolled heavily against his one side, but she was still breathing, somehow. He grimaced at his sight. She'd have a black eye come morning, and a scar on her face besides. Perhaps more. Why are you letting us go? Kuro croaked. Why not? The woman tilted her head again, like a dragon regarding ants beneath its claws. You're no threat to me like this, and like I said before, I refuse to kill children. She seemed to preen a little bit at that sticking point. My parents raised me better than that. Now get, before I change my mind. Naruto got. Kuro slinked silently after him. And so it was that the Branwen tribe suffered a crushing defeat. Hold still and let me stab you. Never. Naruto laughed and danced forward with a smile as Omen sought his head with ruthless dispatch. Rather than evade, he stepped into Raven's guard. A hand swung upwards with lazy grace to slap the flat of her bloody blade away from his face and force her arms up into the air. Once again, its keen edge had failed to reach him through no fault but her own. She didn't give up, of course. She never did. His instincts shrieked a warning and he dropped down on his haunches as she chambered a kick at his head. A breeze swept over him. He knew better than to look up by no but as ever his eyes held other plans. They drifted to the north, whistled. Oh, azure orbs creased in a grin as he thumbed his chin. They're black today. Good choice. Raven's pale visage burned a rosy pink. Roared die. He blocked the wild haymaker that followed, grabbed Raven by said fist and reeled her in like a fish, crushing her stomach against his knee. She dropped her sword and folded over him with a choking gasp, retching for air that wouldn't came. In the same instant he dropped down to one knee while simultaneously lifting the leg and dragging her across it. An elbow slammed down on Raven's unprotected back, pinning her in his lap as he laid her flat across his knees. Her spine stiffened as she realized what he intended. Don't you dare. Too late. Naruto's arm swung up and his open palm cracked down on her exposed flank. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. An angry shriek greeted him with each slap. Heh, sweet music to his ears. Even after all these years, Raven was just fun to mess with. Especially now. She really did have too many openings. Give up, yet he grinned down at her. I can do this all day. Teary, shameful eyes glowered up at him. Never. Another spank had her jumping in his lap. Care to say that again? She grit her teeth. Another smack. Hayek. Naruto knew he could have ended their duel there and forced Raven to capitulate before the tribe, but something told him she'd never forgive him for it. There would be hell to pay for this already. She'd have a throbbing handprint on her arse for the rest of the day. And he got the satisfaction of knocking her down a few pegs. Wouldn't do for her to get too big for her britches. Defeat had made them strong, the years grizzled their youth and cut away the fat. Of course it had changed other things as well. He'd grown up for one. Raven had grown up and out. It made teasing her that much sweeter, but there was too much of a good thing. So he feigned weakness and let her wriggle free. The very moment he did, Raven snatched up her blade and launched it at him like a spear. Aura sparked as he caught it by the hilt and flung back. Warm morning sunlight glinted off the blood-red blade while it flew into her waiting grasp. Raven caught it, pivoted, dug her heels in and came at him again, cutting a scarlet swath through the air. Naruto swayed back, letting it cut harmlessly past. He straightened, thumbing his nose at her. You'll have to do better than. The stray strand of severed saffron gold hair swept past his right eye and fluttered to the floor. That blue eyes pulsed an angry red as he beheld the lonely strand. You do realize this means war. Raven closed the distance with laughter. It was a sharp, angry sound. Oh, she was going to make him pay for this. He just knew it. Much like Harbinger and Omen, prophecy had been reforged long ago. Now the whip sword was a deadly instrument of wrath in his right hand. Sharper, heavier, with an extra surprise or two in store for the unwary. Even Raven, not so little now, hadn't seen them all. Now he brought it crashing down on her guard before she could strike, drawing a grunt from her and forcing her to brave her blade with both hands. Rather than retreat, he squeezed a trigger and the serrated edge of the blade whirred ominously as moving parts began to writhe and shift. Red eyes widened. Oh, that is complete and utter bullshit, she roared and ripped her blade away before the chainsaw could cut her in half. Or a spark before she could get away. She glowered at the pitted surface of her dust blade. How long have you been hiding that? Naruto waved his blade back into a simple sword once more. Since last year. With a snarl, Raven shattered her battered blade and slammed it into her sheath to draw another. Sparks shivered across the now blue blade as she took on a stance. Who using lightning dust this time? Naruto quirked a brow. That shit's expensive. You really wanna win, don't ya? Naruto lazily flicked his wrist and prophecy unfurled with a vicious hiss, the whip sword batting her blade aside and nearly catching her head for the trouble. Raven twisted out of its path and snarled as it raked a jagged line against her collarbone. That would bruise later. Hey, she had aura. She could take it. Still it tore through her shirt and he paused for a moment, briefly distracted by the pale expanse of her slender neck. But only a moment this time. He kicked out, flinging her away before she could try to lock blades with him again. Yet another lesson he'd learned. Mercy was all well and good, but mercy had limits. Too much got you hurt. Mercy left scars. Raven would forever bear one running across her right eye. Really, it was a miracle she hadn't lost it altogether. Just the thought of it was enough to make his fists clench. They were weak back then. Goldilocks they'd taken to calling their tormentor such for lack of name had picked them apart like the children they were. They were weak then, but now they were strong. Well, stronger at any rate. Hopefully it would be enough. All right. Raven scraped herself off the floor, a small smile alighting on her full lips. Time to end this. Something about it set him on edge. Naruto settled into a stance of his own. If you're that eager to lose, then by all means. I won't be losing. Her grin grew to shy-dating proportions. You're not the only one who's learned a new trick or two. That's cute, but I don't believe you. Raven snarled and swept an arm through the air to her right with a vicious grin. A horde of crimson portals opened at her back one after the other. Naruto's jaw clicked open. As he looked on in quiet disbelief, a teeming host of scarlet swords emerged within their rippling depths, all pointed toward him. Distantly, his mind began to count them all. By the time she reached 24 he'd lost track. She shouldn't be able to do that. Her semblance could only create portals to those she'd bonded with, and never this many. His childhood friend folded both hands before her bosom with a triumphant grin. Do you believe now, mongrel? Well, he blinked. Yes, that semblance training paid off. The bandit flung her arms forward at him and a storm of swords answered. Dust kicked up, obscuring Naruto's vision as he kicked back and flung himself to safety. He never saw Raven fly free from another crimson portal behind him. By the time her shadow fell over him it was too late. Omen's hilt smote him on the back of the head. Stars burst before his vision as aura crackled. One hand flew up to cup the back of his skull, and it was in that moment, blinded, that she swept his legs. Even as Naruto fell, she grabbed his jacket, fingers fisting against the green fabric. His back struck the ground and he had a brief moment of realization before she struck again. Huh, clever girl. Raven roared in triumph and rode him to the ground. Finally, triumph burned through Raven Branwen as she pumped a fist through the air. After all these years, she'd finally managed to land a hit on the slippery bastard. And it only cost her a bit of her pride. That doesn't count. Irrelevant. She slashed a hand through the air. Victory is mine. That was a cheap shot and you know it. Naruto wheezed from where he lay. My poor head. Was it she didn't think so? She'd had years to master such and she wasn't little anymore. At 16 years of age, she'd grown up and out in more ways than one. Naruto often remarked on it, so this time she'd used her beauty as a distraction. She hadn't expected it to work quite so well. But here at last, victory was hers. She had fought, trained, overcome. For in training, she became strong. Stronger than she'd ever dreamed possible. She pushed her limits, hit a wall, smashed through said wall. In another life she would have been content to let her skills reach a plateau, not so now. She had a goal, a purpose, someone to surpass, someone to kill. She was weak, who decided that? Her semblance was gated to bonds once again, who decided that nonsense? Locked to only a single pair of points, only one at a time, who decided that? Nobody. That's who she decided such things. It was her soul. Granted, her newly empowered semblance was a bitch on her aura reserves, and a pain to keep stocked with weapons, but it was well worth the risks. Quantity had a strength all its own, and when quantity was combined with quality, well, the results spoke for themselves. Her first victory stood as stark proof of that. He spit on the ground as she sat atop him. I liked you better when you were short. You didn't hit so damn hard. You fought well. Raven did not pull him up. Instead she climbed backward his prone form, now straddling him with her hips. He went curiously still beneath her, not daring to move. However, you also lost the bet. She couldn't quite keep the smile from his face. Now you have to keep your promise. Fine, I'm yours for the day. He flung up his arms in surrender. What do you want to do? Raven's grin turned predatory. I want you. Shock wiped away his scowl. Hey. Before he could think to throw her off, she dipped her head and pressed her lips to his, melding her mouth against his own. Not bad. She still didn't see what all the fuss was about. A kiss was a kiss. It wasn't as if they were screwing one another. There didn't need to be any emotion here. Yes, she told herself. She was simply curious, doing this to get a rise out of him. And if she dipped down for a second, and a third, then what of it? No one questioned her. And quite suddenly, Naruto moved. One moment she found herself atop him, the next he locked his legs around her and rolled, leaving her pinned beneath him. His eyes weren't blue anymore. They were red, slitted and intense, like the gaze of a great and terrible beast. Such a lovely color, scarlet met crimson. His forehead pressed against hers, their noses brushes. Cute. When he spoke, the word was a growl. Do that again and I'll give you something to scream about. All the blood rushed to Raven's face. Why you? Ray, Kuro's voice called, ruining the moment as he emerged from a nearby tent. Pops was looking for you and what the hell are you doing? Leave it to her brother to be the noisy one. Nothing. Naruto climbed off her with a triumphant grin. Vengeance was his and they knew it. Does the old geezer want us for something? Kuro looked like he'd sucked on a lemon, but he held his tongue. Yeah, about that. Celus awaited them within his tent. As ever, Naruto grimaced at the sight of the man when they entered. The raid, ghastly though it was, had marked everyone in different ways. They each held their scars, mental and physical alike. Raven wore hers on the outside. Kuro and he kept theirs within, anger and guilt mingling with shame to form a potent concoction. By comparison, the injuries of Celus were both visible and visceral. Yet he bore them with pride rather than shame. Somehow, they made the man even more intimidating. You've come. Good. Celus Branwen lounged impatiently atop his throne of bones and regarded his children with a keen eye. Naruto tried not to look at the scars, but he couldn't help himself. Celus hadn't simply been burned by the Huntress on that fateful day. He'd lost his left eye and right with his arm to her as well. His dominant hand now ended in a wickedly curved hook, one that tapped idly against his chair as he regarded them. The other clutched his staff in hand, deadly as ever. Even with one hand, the chief was a man to be feared. But that was neither here nor there. I have called the three of you here for a grand purpose. His voice had an unusual bite to it this morning, as if he were forcing the words out. Heed my words and obey. Naruto's brow shot straight into his hairline. Raven offered a begrudging nod, one he and Kuro mirrored. None of them knelt, of course. That was not way of the tribe. You did not bow to anyone. But a ripple of confusion passed through them all the same. It was rare enough for Celus to call them without a raid, rarer still to speak to them like this. Perhaps it was the raids themselves, how poorly they'd gone of late. Regardless, he seemed to grapple with himself for a moment before he recovered enough to speak. I am sending the 3 of you to Beacon, he declared with resounding finality. Pack your bags. In the silence that followed, one could hear a pin drop. Initially, the unlikely trio exchanged baffled looks, if only because his words didn't truly take root in their hearts at first. Beacon them absurd. But as the silence stretched on and no reply was given, incredulity became confusion. Confusion became anger, and anger became dismay. What? Kuro joined him. This is bullshit. Raven all but sputtered. Father, you can't be serious, the hunters. Enough. Celus slammed his staff against the ground, silencing them with a mighty crack. We cannot beat them. He all but spit the words. Do you understand now? They are seeking us, hunting us. The last 3 raids have ended in disaster. Scores of our warriors are dead. We are dying, a bladed fist slashed out, carving a silvery arc. If we do not learn their ways, we will die. By that reckoning, 4 years is a middling price to pay. The 3 of you will go to Beacon, or you will be cast out. His words drew a flinch from the 3 of them. Learn the hunter's tricks and return to us. Fail, and you will not return at all. Raven bit her lip, wearing a surly look. Why not? Haven? Kuro raised a hand into the ensuing silence. Ain't that closer? Because, the chieftain turned his head aside and spat. She may be there, and she knows your faces. Lionheart is also a craven and a coward. He continued with a grimace. While such a man may yet be useful to our purposes, it also makes him erratic, unpredictable. Such a man is one to be wary of. Naruto bit back a shiver and grit his teeth until they ached in the back of his jaw. Not because of this lion whatever fellow, but for fear of another individual altogether. Goldilocks. Did he want to fight her? No. Not really. Did Raven? Yes. Very much. That woman had taken on the entire tribe by herself and one-handedly. Her deeds left her a legend through Mistral, if not the whole of Remnant. Every year there were more and more hunters because of her work. Her heroics spurred an entire generation to follow in her footsteps. When do we leave? Just outside the tent, the distant whine of a descending bullhead filled the air. Right now, Celus declared, gesturing toward the tent flap. Go to Vale and prove your strength. Now it was Naruto's turn to protest, though not as loudly as Raven. Won't we need transcripts or something? Celus snapped his fingers. A member of the tribe hurried forward from the corner of the tent, pressing a folder into each of their hands. Keep those on you at all times until you are accepted as students, he instructed. Those cost me a great many favors. Do not lose them. Am I understood? Naruto leafed through his with a cursory glance. A list of stellar accomplishments sprang out at him, none of which were his own. He was listened as an orphan. Well, at least there was one nugget of truth among the lies. Better than nothing, he supposed. Stole a peek at Kuro's and found much of the same. They shared a shrug and a nervous laugh. Deeds like these wouldn't hold up under any true scrutiny. Then again, they didn't have to. No one was going to look twice at a group of teenagers who looked to be from the wilds. Raven kept hers close to her chest, her brow gone dark. And if they see through them, irrelevant. Celus waved his hooked arm through the air, silencing them. In truth, those papers are merely a formality. The man who runs Beacon, this Ozpin, has been known to recruit among the strong. A grim grin tugged at his scarred visage. And the 3 of you are strong indeed. He will gladly welcome 3 students of your caliber. When they didn't challenge him, said smirk grew. The fool is unaware of us. He will not see through you. Raven bridled. And how do you propose we? A heavy envelope smacked into her bosom. She snarled and flung it at Naruto, forcing him to catch it. He needn't look at it to grasp its contents. Its weight was considerable. That should be more than enough lien to bribe the authorities, should they challenge you. Celus declared. The rest is yours to do with as you please. Now, then. He rose from his throne and padded forward, heavy boots smacking against the dirt as the blonde tucked the parcel into his bag. A meaty hand came down on his shoulder, rooting him where he stood. There is another matter. Naruto gulped. Yes. The chieftain regarded him with his lone eye for a long piercing moment. Whatever he found there must have pleased him because that mighty palm loosened just so. I place you in charge of my children, Naruto, Celus said. Raven squawked at his words and was summarily ignored for her protest. Guard them with your life and keep them out of trouble. Kuro shrugged. So he's gonna be the boss while we're away, fine by me. Naruto flinched. Kuro, what came the yawn? I'd rather follow you than my sister. You don't get stabby when you're mad. Raven rammed an elbow into his side. Poor girl. She looked to be on the verge of an aneurysm. He is possessed of a cooler head than most. Celus agreed. Trust your gut. He told him. Follow your instincts and return to us. You still gonna be here when we return? Raven challenged. HRMPH. Celus grinned then, and for a moment the years seemed to slip from him as he straightened his back. I'm not so old that I can't defend my seat, girl. Something that might have resembled a smile passed across his scarred face. If you want it that badly, you'll have to take it from me. He gave them a nudge. Now be off with you. Raven flounced off, and with a commiserating look, Kuro joined her. Naruto trailed after them, his thoughts gone maudlin. This didn't sit right with him, but Celus had a point. 9 and 10 raids failed nowadays. Aura and semblances were all well and good by themselves, but sadly the fact remained that the tribe lacked capable warriors. No one knew how to unlock aura through anything other than sheer trauma, and few wanted to risk death for a power boost. The same could be said of semblances hells he'd not even unlocked as yet. No, huntsman training prevailed in the face of the untrained masses every time. Numbers. Still, just walk into Beacon. It sounded so easy. It couldn't possibly work. The blonde blew out a sigh. Why did he have a feeling it would? He eyed the bullhead warily as he stepped out of the tent. He'd never been in one of those before. How bad could it be? Trust your gut, Celus said. Follow your instincts, he said. Easier said than done, Naruto said, because now, his guts along with a good bit of his breakfast were currently sprawled all over the floor of the bullhead. He tried to stand, tried to move, but his stomach clenched and a fresh bout of weakness sent him crashing back into high seat. Every bout of turbulence sent the contents of his stomach roiling like a storm-tossed sea, much to the displeasure of his fellow passengers. Motion sickness. Apparently that was a thing. Who knew not he? Certainly. If he had, he never would have set foot on this cursed metal bird. Men were meant to walk, not fly. Oh gods, the smell. Raven howled and clutched at her nose. Is that your semblance or something? Gotta be. Hiro croaked, trying to huddle into a corner. Shut up, kill you. Naruto tried to speak, only for his stomach to heave yet again. No, it wasn't a freaking semblance, he just got airsick. Unfortunately, that left it in here with them. The pilot had long since given up on the three of them. Celus as Leon may have bought his silence, it did not, however, buy his cooperation. Not in this. He'd sealed the doors to keep the stench out of his cockpit. In that, he had a reprieve. He could lock himself away from the worst of the stench. His fellow passengers could not. Raven and Kuro were wise enough to tuck their legs up into their chests to save their boots, but as nope. Lost cause. He'd have to burn them. Thankfully he'd packed a spare. Just how much did you eat this morning? Raven snarled at him. You should be running on empty by now. Naruto turned towards her to offer a rebuttal. Instead, his cheeks bulged again. Raven turned pale, absolutely ghost white. No, don't you dare. The last of his breakfast betrayed him in a rush of green. She howled all the way to their destination. If the city of Vale was a castle, then Beacon was an absolute fortress. That was the only moniker Naruto could think to give it as he stumbled off the airship. Note to self, airships were worse than bullheads. He'd scarcely had time to recover from the first before Raven and Kuro pushed him into the second. And wouldn't you know it, now that his stomach wasn't actively trying to commit seppuku on him, he found he could actually appreciate the scenery. Well, he muttered to himself as he stared up at it. Hot damn. Judging by Raven's silence and Kuro's low whistle, the twins agreed with his statement. Even from a distance it reminded of a castle from some lost fable, something out of myth and legend. Grand archways and huge pillars, all the architecture alone brought the shoddy huts of the tribe to shame. Mighty spires stretched toward the clouds, as if to pierce the very heavens themselves. A looming tower rose in the distance, taller than all the rest. The sight of it should have filled him with dread. Oddly enough, it did. He'd never seen Beacon before, but something about it felt good. Right, as if he were meant to be here. Strange. He pushed the feeling aside and took the lead, drinking liberally from a bottle of water to wash the foul taste out of his mouth. So we're here, he declared, eyeing the crowd spilling around them. Yes, we just walk in. Seems like it, vomit boy. Naruto twitched. Do not call me that. Raven's grin grew to shide-eating proportions. Why ever not? Naruto's twitch became a spasm. With a physical force of will, he peeled his fingers from Prophecy's hilt and willed himself to keep walking. She was never going to let him live this down. Not after he'd ruined her boots on their last ride. He just knew it. Fine, she could be that way. He'd get her back for this later. There would be vengeance for this, a reckoning like no other. That's the plan. Kuro shrugged helplessly, dodging a girl in a white cloak as she hurtled past. I don't like it either. Naruto muttered an apology as an absolute giant of a man skirted the. If someone tries to stop us. Raven nudged aside someone with dark hair and striking golden eyes. Then we stop them. Sure. Naruto threw his arms into the air as he lengthened his stride, walking ahead of them and the crowd alike. Simple enough. I bow before your wisdom, oh great one. As you should. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Sarcasm, Raven. Learn it. Kuro rolled his eyes. Honestly, you too. Just get a room already. Preferably one far, far away from me. Red eyes narrowed. Blue orbs absolutely twitched. With his back turned, Kuro never realized his peril. He never saw them nod. Never noticed them shake hands and set aside their spite. Never felt the breeze on the back of his neck as they wound up. By the time he did really, it was just plain bad luck on his parto. Wait, wham! A pair of clenched fists smacked into the back of his head and drove him face first into the street, leaving a decidedly Kuro-shaped impression behind. Aura sparked pitifully as he clawed himself out of it. Unable to stay mad at his old friend for long, Naruto found himself hauling him up. All right, I deserve that. Stupid semblance. Kuro sulked. Damn thing's working overtime today. I say, a new voice called out behind them. Just where do you three think you're going? Raven swore softly. Speaking of which, Naruto turned toward it and found himself fighting down a frown as he beheld a mass of red, black, and gray hastening their way. In that order, the man, while not necessarily old, reminded him of a fat walrus. Smelled like one, too. clad in a double-breasted burgundy suit with gold piping and buttons. He wore dark pants tucked into olive boots, similar in appearance and construction to something cavalry might wear. Oh gods, the stench all old leather and aftershave with busy brows and a magnificent mustache to match. Birds could nest in the damn thing. To Beacon, of course. Raven lifted her chin in open defiance. We're here for initiation. Are you now? His bushy brow rose. Well, you're certainly dressed for the part, but I don't recall seeing you on the list. I would KNWO. He boomed a laugh. I've been looking at it for the last 3 hours. So much for the forged transcripts. Hiro still behind Naruto, even as Raven's mouth clicked open to challenge what had to be a teacher. Naruto felt the jaws of defeat closing around them. Thinking quickly, he clamped a hand around her jaw and shoved himself forward before she could damn them further. We're something of a recent addition, he hastened to add. And you are. Peter Port, Remnant's finest huntsman at your service. The man's belly shook as he laughed again. He winked at Raven. Do try not to swoon, my dear. She made a disgusted nose and had to be held back by her brother. I take it you were recommended by a teacher. Then Port's gaze switched to Naruto, regarding him with sudden scrutiny. It must have been recent indeed, to slip under my nose. Have eyes like a hawk, after all. Yeah, one of the brass recommended us. Hiro, sensing his distress and anxious to help, only dug their hole deeper. It took every fiber of Naruto's being not to round on him. Damn it, Kuro. Raven made a muffled noise against his palm. Capital Peter pounced on it and fished his scroll out with speed, bellying his girth. Who was it? Then Osmond, Bart, Sapphire, Yin. I'll just call them and confirm. Can't be too careful these days with bandits about. Naruto's tongue went dead and cold in his mouth. Blast it. He had them. Did he know he couldn't? There is just no way. They'd been so careful now he had to give a name. Port would turn right around and call them, and in doing so, damn them. His mind whirled, seeking an escape. Fight or flight warred within him. His hand moved. What's going on here? A new voice called, stopping him short. Why are you messing with my students? All eyes turned as a woman with striking golden hair sauntered their way. Lilac orbs flashed from a pale face, framed by long hair that shone like the sun in a confident smile. Naruto threw a silent prayer to the brother gods for their intervention. Maybe this was bad luck. Maybe it wasn't. Didn't matter. Roll with it. By contrast to Port, this woman seemed to thrive on the idea of style. That, and a myriad of his favorite colors. Black, orange, red, and gold. Clad in a pleated black jacket that left her midriff exposed and a low-cut crimson crop top with a spiraling red emblem on the left breast in black, she nevertheless cut an imposing figure. Her hips swayed with every step. Your students, you say? Port's mustache twitched, hiding his smile. Well, I suppose I have my answer then. This strange newcomer wore a pair of golden, knee-high boots and orange over-theknee socks, pushed up just below the knee. A blue bandana is tied around her left knee, contrasting against an orange infinity scarf and black fingerless gloves. Each step lent her a confident swagger among other things. Naruto felt his throat go dry. Good lord, you could stack drinks on those things. Her brow drew down for a moment as she regarded the three of them, eyes crinkling now in a slight smile. Once more, the unlikely trio exchanged a glance. Why was she sticking up for them? None dared speak the words aloud. In the end, they didn't have to. Yeah, they're here on my recommendation, Port, she said, folding both arms before her bosom. Stop scaring them already, will ya? Oh, my mistake, then, Port pondered, scratching at his scalp. Just like you to recruit off campus. Suppose it makes sense. He clapped Naruto on the back, nearly knocking the air from his lungs. Why didn't you say she brought you here, lad? Hiro released a deep shuddering breath and nearly collapsed behind them. Naruto coughed. All right, well. Raven grit her teeth. Our girl's been on quite the recruitment drive. Port trampled over their relief with another laugh. Why, you're the 5th group she's headhunted this year alone. Don't mind them, they're shy. The stranger smirked. We'll put them with the rest, then. Naruto and Raven exchanged a glance. The rest? Quite so far be it from me to try and hold back the next aspiring generation of huntsmen. With one final slap on the back, the portly huntsman departed back the way he'd come, though not before firing one last parting shot. Off you go, then. Don't want to be late now, do we? Naruto watched Port like a hawk the entire way. Only once he vanished into the building proper did he dare relax. Sadly, it didn't end there. Well, that was close. The moment Port was gone, the strangely dressed woman rounded on them. A hand rose in a jaunty wave. Long time no see, squirts. That's 2 you owe me for, now. Naruto blinked rapidly. Recognition dawned. You. Me. The woman flashed them a cheeky thumbs up. Wow, just look at you little shits, grew up fast. Hiro snarled. Raven swore a bloody streak. And Naruto found himself looking at the same woman who had laid them low all those years ago. Older perhaps, but every bit as he remembered. She'd abandoned her mask and he barely recognized her without, but it was impossible to forget that voice. It had been burned into his brain. Now he saw her face, and something in him wilted. She looked remarkably like an older Raven, and didn't that paint a worrying picture? Was there some relation there? An older sibling? No, Celus didn't have any more kids, right? What are you doing? In Beacon, Kuro cried. I teach here. The woman planted a hand on her hip and flashed them a wink. Don't worry, your secret is safe with me. I won't spoil your test. I quotel I'll kill you. A black streak flew at her. Naruto and Kuro caught it in midair and wrangled to the floor. Raven tore and clawed at them, to no avail. Their grip was as iron. Good thing too, because she looked to be all of an instant from ripping her sword from its sheath and doing something very foolish. It didn't help when her wood victim regarded her with a scoff. Hot-headed as ever, I see. Raven all but frothed at the mouth. You dare. Sure do. Blondie smacked her lips with a resounding pop. You're a right piece of work. You know that she shook her head, sending the golden mane of her hair swaying from side to side. And here I was hoping you would have cooled off by now. Guess not. Ray, not now, Kuro hissed, pressing a hand down on her back. Save it for later. His twin ignored him. She only had eyes for the smirking blonde before them. I will kill you, she hissed, squirming in their grasp. I will, I swear. The buxom blonde dug a finger in one ear. And, you humiliated me that day, Raven bucked, thrashing and made a fool of me. I'll never forgive you. Tough. I don't want your forgiveness. Lilac eyes flashed into red as she planted an armored fist on one hips. The sight of her eyes alarmed Naruto. Look at those two. She flicked a lazy finger toward Naruto and Kuro, noting their tense expressions. I beat their asses just as badly and you don't see them herring off after me. They clearly got over it. Do the same. Let it go, birdbrain. Raven hissed. And if I don't, a blonde arched. Then I call Port back and tell him I made a mistake. You wouldn't dare. The other brow rose to match it. Try me, Raven. How do you know my name? Something dark flashed through those lilac eyes. I know a lot of things. Don't feel like telling you. Raven made a choking sound and redoubled her struggles with all the madness of a Beowulf. When it became readily apparent that she wouldn't be able to fight her way free of Kuro and Naruto together, she relented. Only then did they dare let her up. Naruto kept one hand on her shoulder, ready to reel her back if she tried to do anything foolish again. Her shoulder was rock hard under his grasp, all but vibrating with tension. She glared bloody red daggers at him from the corner of her eye and wouldn't speak to either of them. Lovely. She was going to hold a grudge for this, he just knew it. Great, the woman clapped. That wasn't so hard, was it? We'll be fast friends in no time. Was she patronizing them? Naruto couldn't be sure. You gonna give us your name this time, he asked. Nah, not my real one. Lilac eyes sparkled with fresh mirth. Girls gotta have a few secrets. For now, just call me Yin. That name was so obviously fake that Naruto couldn't even bring himself marshal a response to it. Perhaps it was for the best. Something told him not to pry. He couldn't well call her Goldilocks now, could he? His hands ground into fists at his side. What could he say to her? Should he even say anything at all? Why save them? If she'd held her tongue they would have been ejected from the school grounds, perhaps even thrown in jail for trying to scheme their way, In the end, he held his tongue. Good luck tomorrow. She sauntered away with a merry whistle. Looking forward to seeing you in class. Oh, a pause followed as a lone violet eye peered over her shoulder. Make sure you've got a half-decent landing strategy, too. Wouldn't want one of you to die. I'm pretty fond of existing. Naruto blinked. What was that? Nope, good luck. Bubayin vanished in a golden streak before he could challenge her further. In the ensuing silence that followed, Raven tore free of Naruto's grip. He knew what was coming. Sure enough, she rounded on him. Raven Branwen did not cry. She was far too proud to ever shed tears in public. But she looked hurt all the same, her eyes uncomfortably damp. Her lips made a thin line, hands balling furiously at her sides. For a moment he wondered if she would strike him. But she didn't. Instead she stepped back, crossed both arms and planted her feet. You betrayed me. The words were a hiss. Both of you. I trusted you, and you turned on me. Had to do it. Kuro jammed both hands into his pockets, seeking warmth from the cold air. You were gonna get us caught, Ray. She's the enemy. Your enemy. Naruto stepped up beside the man he thought of as a brother, presenting a united front in the face of Raven's wrath. For whatever reason, she didn't rat us out. She helped us. I don't care. She grit her teeth. You made me look like a fool in front of her. Naruto slammed his forehead against hers. Better than getting your ass beat black and blue. Red eyes flashed dangerously, but Naruto dare not relent. That was the thing about Raven. She respected strength above all else. Sentiment, kindness, charity, they meant little to her. If you weren't of the tribe, then she'd not listen to you unless you were strong enough to make her back down. Oh, she'd spit and hiss and curse, but she would yield, albeit begrudgingly. But he was of the tribe, and held enough power to force her obedience if pressed. She knew that. So did he. Sure enough, she wilted under his blazing gaze. I need to know that I can trust you to have my back. She murmured, glaring a hole into her boots. Do you? Kuro groaned. Not this shit again, Ray. Quiet, she absolutely hissed at Kuro. This isn't about you. No, it was about him, wasn't it? Naruto felt his scowl slip. Just a little. Just a touch. For all her claims of strength, Raven wasn't strong of heart. Her loss all those years ago had cast a shadow of doubt over her soul. She acted fierce to cover it up, while in truth she was afraid. Not solely of defeat, but death. Betrayal. She wasn't a coward, and hopefully never would be, but she still had the potential to go the wrong way if pressed. Cold crimson eyes met his, demanding an answer. And what could he give her but the truth? His scowl softened. Of course I have your back. Always, she whispered. Here and beyond. Yup. He clapped her on the shoulder. Then let me be leader. Nice try. Cut the crap. Naruto slashed a hand through the air to silence her. You want to fight her again that badly? He shrugged as she stepped back. Go ahead. But do it later. On our terms, not hers. Red eyes fluttered in a rapid blink. Are you suggesting I wait until we graduate until we can prepare? 4 years is a long time. Kuro nodded. She's older than us. She'll plateau, and will be stronger. She clenched a fist in realization. Of course, right. Naruto almost pitied her. Was that what she believed? Yin had a head start on them more than a decade at that, and that was being generous. It would take years to close the gap. 4 might not be enough. And if he was honest, he wasn't sure he supported killing Yin. Not now. She'd helped them, for reasons he didn't understand, but there could be no denying she had plucked them out of a difficult situation. There was a mystery here, one he was determined to get to the bottom of. But for now, Raven could believe what she wanted. What could possibly come of it? A bell tolled nearby. We should get going. Any longer than this and we really will be late. They followed a few stragglers and found the main grounds in short order after that. From there they followed the crowd and tried to look like they belonged here. Easier said than done. Putting their predicament with port aside, their rough appearance and dark clothes drew attention to them almost immediately. Whispers arose. Naruto and Kuro ignored them. Raven snapped at anyone who came close. Still, no one challenged them again, and Naruto almost dared to hope that would be the end of things. It was not to be. Blast it, someone swore behind them. Not again. Naruto craned his neck in the direction of said voice. He didn't like what he found there. Whoever they were, they sounded weak. By rights he should have ignored them. They weren't here to make friends. Their goal was all that mattered. After the last close call, they needed to stay low, drawing attention to themselves. Bad idea. Worst idea. His legs betrayed him. Raven grabbed at his wrist. Where are you going? Her words were a hiss. Naruto tore his arm free and jogged toward the sound. I'll just be a moment. He shouted over one shoulder. Call me on your scroll if you need me. Naruto found the source of the commotion in relatively short order. Not at all difficult, that. As he raced back the way he'd come, he found a frail-looking girl clad in a blue-white combat dress fussing over a disaster zone. She appeared to grappling with a heavy silver case of some sort. Even from this distance he could tell it was far heavier than she. Naruto winced as he heard her strain at it. Many more such cases lay behind her, scattered around an upturned silver trolley that looked to have seen better days. Oddly enough, each case bore a strange snowflake symbol. He failed to recognize that, too. Whoever she was, she looked to be having a bad time. Move it, Amniu. Slim arms strained at her briefcase as her feet ground against the floor, to no avail. As he approached, Naruto slowed his pace and took a moment to compose himself. He watched her struggle for a moment, then another. This thighs was honestly adorable. With a shake of his head, he placed one hand to the side of his face and he called out, "Hey, need some help?" She rounded on him with a cry and he froze, captivated. Hair white as snow briefly shielded a startled face before the wind spun it away, revealing eyes of watery ice. She looked well, not so much lost as pitiful. Like a little field mouse. Unsurprising, given she looked to a bit of a lightweight herself. For all his attempts to harden it, Naruto felt his heart go out to her. Oh, she jolted, seeing him at last. I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Did something happen here? Someone knocked over my trolley and ruined my luggage. She sniffled. They didn't even stop to help me, and the casing cracked. A heel stomped down with indignant rage. Blasted gravity dust, I can't move any of this now that it's been activated. Dust, eh? On a whim, Naruto hefted the nearest case and opened it. An array of dust crystals awaited him within. Several were cracked. Curious. Why not just refine it? Dust was volatile in its unrefined state. A girl balked at him. I couldn't budge that. Just how strong are you? Strong enough. In short order he did away with the ruined crystals, righted the trolley, and stacked the cases back in what he hoped was an orderly fashion. Still, this is a lot of dust. Yes, she huffed. My weapon requires it. Weapon? What weapon? He saw no such weapon anywhere on her person. Only a curiously large silver bangle on her wrist, coupled with mecha shift. Then what could it be? He wanted to ask, but held himself back. Now wasn't the time to geek out over someone's weapon. He'd done what he came here to do. Only, I didn't get your name. Her lips pursed in a grimace. Willow, she whispered. Willow Schnee. Had he heard that somewhere before? Probably not important. Schnee, a nice name. He turned to leave. Be seeing you around. Good luck. Wait. He rounded on her and found pale blue eyes not unlike his own fluttering in a baffled blink. Her lips parted, closed, parted yet again. An alarm went off in the back of Naruto's head. Why wasn't she moving? Had he gone and broken her somehow? You were supposed to be polite to someone when you first met them, weren't you? And yet the girl kept looking at him. Her lower lip trembled. A delicate hand rose, hiding her mouth from view. You don't know who I am. I'll know now. It was his turn to blink. Should I? Was this a cultural thing? He'd never left the tribe before. Of course he wouldn't know some random person in Vale. But he'd read plenty of books. He was fairly certain how an encounter between two strangers was meant to go. Well, relatively. Fiction could only carry you so far, after all. Surely all those novels wouldn't lead him astray. It's nothing. She smiled softly, looking quite relieved for reasons he again failed to understand. Just call me Willow. And who might you be? Right. His books had told him what to do next. He remembered that much. The next step was abundantly clear to him. Naruto. Bending down, he took her hand and pressed his lips to the back of her palm. It's a pleasure to meet you. Her pale face burned a fascinating shade of red. Her lips parted. What's going on here? Someone cried. And someone ruined the moment. Naruto rolled his eyes and rounded on the sound. Another girl. Of course it was. This one immediately proved herself the polar opposite of Willow, if only because she moved with poise and purpose. She knew she belonged here. She wore a pale blue long-sleeved blouse for the winter months, but it was from there that her outfit truly deviated from the norm. Her lower body was sheathed in a black high-waist pencil skirt bearing bronze buttons and black-brown stockings alongside matching bronze heels. Sage above, she even had a cape. And honest to goodness came damn thing was purple. Piercing green eyes blazed into his, framed by golden hair and a fearsome scowl. But really, a pencil skirt really what kind of aspiring huntress wore that for crying out loud? He was beginning to think every woman in Beacon aspiring student or otherwise was a supermodel or something. Yin and these two had already reinforced that opinion beyond doubt. She took one look at him and Willow, holding hands, and started sputtering. Unhand her at once, you ruffian. Any points for style she might have gained were instantly lost with those words. Wait, no, Willow yanked her hand away. It's not what it looks like. Is it so the blonde? It looks like he was harming you. He wasn't. The Schnee bristled. Stop. Aren't we overreacting a little? And who are you? The newcomer rounded on him with a scoff. Naruto's first instinct was to speak his mind, to snap at this prissy prude and tell her just where she could shove her opinion. She struck him as rude, standoffish, someone itching for a fight where none was to be had. Not even a weapon on her, at least, not one he could see. With a supreme effort of will he reeled himself back and forced a smile to his face. When in doubt, kill them with kindness. The name's Naruto. He offered her his hand. Pleased to meet you. I hope we can be friends. Friends? She turned up her nose at him. With a brute like you. Somewhere deep inside his soul, a crimson eye opened. Must not kill. Naruto slammed a lid on it and choked down the instinctive urge of anger. On a certain level he knew why everyone was so wary of him. He was rough. He looked rough. His clothes were rough, just like Raven and Kuro's were. That wasn't an excuse for folks to run around calling him a miscreant and a ruffian. But he refused to rise to the bait. He had a purpose here, one not served by snapping at anyone who looked at him funny. Friends are just people you haven't met yet. His smile strained, but he refused to let it shatter. He dare not. The blonde girl blinked back at him, green eyes narrowing behind her glasses. That's nonsense. No. Naruto beamed. Nonsense would be fighting for no reason. What's your name? The Suntobe student considered his outstretched hand for a long moment. Reluctantly, she reached out and accepted it, her palm clasping his. Glinda, she said at last. My name is Glinda. Glinda, was it nice? You can leave now. Willow butted into Glinda's side with surprising force, causing his fellow blonde to stagger and lose hold of his hand. Excuse me, she balked. What was that for? Oh my, are you that dense? Willow made a show of inspecting her nails. Can't you see you're being a bother? I didn't ask for you to come over here. I was trying to help you. The temperature dropped several degrees. I didn't want your help. Typical Schnee arrogance. Glinda clicked her tongue. I should have known better. Why you? It was the wrong thing to say. The air around them, yeah, it was arctic now. Yeah, uptight hussy, I saw him first. Glinda whipped around to glare green daggers at Willow, only for the Schnee to puff out her chest and stand her ground. Sparks skittered between their eyes and their mirrored expressions set off another alarm in the back of Naruto's head. Nope. He knew that look far too well. It was the same Raven wore when she was about to get extra bitchy with him about one thing or another. Double nope. Glinda and Willow were smiling now, yet they looked fit to kill each other. Triple nope, he wasn't having any of this. His scroll vibrated. Naruto snatched at it like a lifeline and read the message within. Where are you? We're in the main hall. Thank the gods. Time to go. Right then, he said to no one in particular. I'll see you later. With a long-suffering sigh, the traveler tossed his head and marched forward, determined to gain some distance while he could. It was too much to hope Willow and Glinda wouldn't follow. They struck him as the sort to hold a grudge. Sure enough, their argument lasted just long enough for them to realize rapid footfalls in his direction only served to cement his suspicions. He didn't fail to notice the two of them trailing in his wake. Stop following us, Willow spat. I beg your pardon, you're the one following me, go away. They weren't fighting over him, he theorized. No, surely not. They couldn't be. He barely said so much as 2 sentences to the both of them. To ch, girls were weird. He didn't understand Raven and he certainly couldn't comprehend these two. He suspected he wouldn't anytime soon. Somewhere behind him, he heard a weapon being drawn, followed by the telltale crackle of a dust discharge. Oh, it had come to blows, then. Don't look back, Naruto, he told himself. They'll just draw you into it. Just my luck, Naruto muttered, hastening his pace. This is what I get for being a nice guy. And from what seemed a single, innocuous meeting. From a simple exchange between strangers. The wheel of fate shattered, and destiny changed. So, this was initiation, then. Kuro found himself rather impressed with Beacon thus far, if only because Raven wasn't. His sister had been growling most of the night. At this rate she'd wind up cracking a molar or worse. He'd given up trying to calm her down long. Sis was probably just jealous of all the attention Naruto was getting. Far be it from him to interfere with that mess. If she had a problem with, then she could bloody well sort it out herself. The imminent explosion promised to be a spectacular one. He looked forward to the fireworks. Only a few hours ago the headmaster had given them some kind of speech about the perils of being a hunter, really. Who didn't know that, and had them herded into the auditorium with everyone else. Like the rest, they had been told to shut up, sit the hell down and find somewhere to sleep. Tomorrow their test would begin. Simple as that. Kuro liked simple. Simple was good. Also, hot damn. Now, Kuro wasn't exactly a connoisseur when it came to women, mind you. Oh, he'd seen his fair share back in the tribe, but none like this. No stick-thin, ugly bandits, these ones. These were, each and every one of them, warriors. All of them strong. Each of them beautiful. There had to be 24 potential applicants here. A single student might give the tribe trouble by their lonesome. But all of them together, they'd not stand a chance. Hell, one of those girls looked like she could snap Raven over her knee like a twig, Raven, for crying out loud. And that was ignoring the men. Geez, what the hell were they feeding these kids? Must be something in the water, he muttered to himself, shaking his head as he leaned against a wall. That, or Beacon's got high standards. Naruto had noticed too, or rather he'd been noticed himself. Trapped with a sullen Schnee on one arm and a glaring Goodwitch on the other with no escape in sight, his friend looked to be at his wit's end. Poor bastard. He hadn't been able to get away from them since they'd found him again. Look, there's really no need to fight, he heard his friend call across the room. Let's just have the chips fall where they may tomorrow, eh? Raven absolutely hissed in her sleeping bag. Hiro quirked a dark brow. You just gonna leave him like that? For a moment, he thought she might. Instead, she rolled over and slammed a pillow over her head. Some might call Naruto dense. Hiro knew better. That one was sharper than he let on. He knew full well why they were fighting over him and he wanted no part of it. He flicked a desperate look Hiro's way and was all but ignored for it. Bastard could stand to suffer a little for once. Puberty had hit him like a truck, giving him a roguish smile and debonair charm. Maybe his semblance really was luck-based after all, at least when it came to women. Really, Kuro almost pitied him. He preferred his a little less fussy. Small wonder Raven was seething. She wasn't used to competition, and these girls were fit, make no mistake about that. She'd have her work cut out for her. Nope, he wasn't going anywhere near that landmine. Blondie might make a good brother-in-law someday, assuming he managed to drag Raven to the altar, but such a day was still long in coming. For now he'd settle in and watch the show. Shame he hadn't brought popcorn. A hand tugged on his sleeve. Excuse me. Red eyes met silver as the younger Branwen dragged himself upright, and sure enough, he found the culprit. He found himself face to face with a girl clad in a white cloak and dark traveling leathers. Unlike the rest, she'd not bothered with her pajamas. Ouch, sleeping in leather wasn't fun. Or perhaps she simply didn't have anything else to wear. Some people came to Beacon with naught but the clothes on their backs. An upswing of pity had him sitting up just a little straighter. At least this one had. Well, hey, little lady. He put on what he hoped was a charming smile as he addressed her. What can I do for you? She wrinkled her nose at him. Could you tell your friend to quiet down? Some of us are trying to sleep. Kuro's spirits fell faster than his head against his chest. Bloody blonde bastard. Yeah, sure. Thanks. She sauntered away with a smile and a wink. Good luck tomorrow. Naruto staggered over 5 minutes later, looking rather worse for the wear. Hair rumpled and clothes disheveled, right sleeve torn and missing his left shoe, he somehow managed to look both irritated and faintly amused at the same time. Raven paid him no heed. She was already sound asleep. Kuro, on the other hand, sorry about that. He scowled as the whiskered warrior granted him a jaw-popping yawn. Couldn't get away. Kuro lobbed a pillow at him. Naruto didn't even try to dodge. He took the feathery missile to the face with sound and aplomb and crashed backward like a fallen elm. By virtue of grace or just blind luck, he landed atop his sleeping bag. Within moments he began to snore. Even in sleep, Raven sensed the movement. She rolled over to latch onto his right arm, claiming it for her own. Kuro clicked his tongue ruefully at the sight. Raven really was more honest when she was asleep. Alone at last, the younger Branwen sighed ruefully and tucked himself in. The things I put up with for family. Sleep came swiftly. Morning was a rushed and torrid affair. In the tribe you woke early, ate early, trained early. It was a way of life. Beacon was no exception. As such, the unlikely trio secured a hearty breakfast of bacon and eggs for themselves well before most of the wood students would even dream of rising. Early bird gets the worm and whatnot. Likewise, their lockers were placed almost perilously close to one another, and as such they were able to secure their weapons with only a mere modicum of fuss. What came after, however, everyone got their gear. Of course, Raven slammed her locker shut as she touched a hand to Omen's massive sheath. Speak for yourself. Hiro leaned around his locker and fixed him with a baleful glare as he secured Harbinger to his back. You've been glaring at that note for the last minute. Black brows waggled at him. Got a secret admirer. Naruto glared bloody red daggers at him over one shoulder. No, prophecy was lighter than it should be. He'd already checked her firing mechanism and found it squeaky clean. It shouldn't be. Someone had cleaned his weapon, sharpened its edge, and restocked what little ammo was left in the chamber. He'd been running perilously low before they came to Beacon and swore to use its long-range form only for emergencies. No longer. Now, his glower was focused upon the bandolier of ammunition he'd found in his locker and the note left behind. It held but 3 lines of dialogue for him. Ought to treat your weapon better, Whiskers. Good luck out there today. He crumpled the note and stashed it in his pocket before Raven could see it or throw a fit. It was her again. That meddling blonde woman. What did she want with the moment? And Harbinger didn't look to have been repaired whatsoever, not by his reckoning at any rate. Which meant she'd singled him out, found his locker, extracted his weapon, and done all this overnight. Why, too many questions, not enough answers. With a long-suffering sigh, he slipped the bandolier over his chest, ignoring Raven's questing expression. Best not to look a gift horse in the mouth for now. They had a test to pass. Naruto pondered that for a moment, his gaze slipping over the milling students in the locker room. Dozens of applicants had come to Beacon this year. Some were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, eager for the fresh term ahead and the chance to do good. Others looked cold and hard, determined to triumph over their peers at any cost. Initiation would be more than fierce. It promised to be bloody, if not entertaining. Just the way Raven and Kuro liked it. And how did he feel about that? Part of him was glad to be out of the tribe and its clannish ways, but their lessons were ingrained into him and not so easily ignored. They weren't here to pick fights. They were here to learn for the next 4 years. Then would they return to the tribe and share what they'd learned? And then his mind continued to question. There would be more raids. With proper huntsman training, the tribe would become the bane of Mistral and all beyond it. They would be a plague upon the weak. None would stand in their way. Did he want that? So it settled. Then he shook the traitorous thought away as he closed and secured his locker. Whatever happens, we'll stick together. Kuro heard the pleading note in his voice and nodded. Works for me. I'd rather be on team with the two of you. Raven rolled her eyes, but didn't deign to challenge him. I'll have a portal ready. We'll stay together. Try as he might, he couldn't let it be. He gave her head a quick pat. Try not to die before that. Ah, she squawked and swatted his arm away. You'd perished long before me. His forehead smashed against hers with a smirk. No, she pushed right back. Yeah, children. Kuro pushed himself between them before they could come to blows. This is my life now. Quite so. A hand came down on his shoulder as new voice chimed dangerously close to his ear. You'd best get used to it. My, but those are nice weapons. Wherever did you get them? The younger Branwen whirled with a yelp and thrashed his way free. The hell? Now no need to be rude. All eyes rounded on the newcomer, a young man with bright eyes set in a pale face, framed by dark brown hair bound in a wicked braid. Raven set a hand to Omen's hilt. And you are? Whomever he was undoubtedly a faunus, made more than evident by the long chitinous tail curling behind him. Clad in a dark leather coat thrown over a strange outfit with matching trousers and black boots, he looked utterly unassuming if one ignored his smile. He didn't seem quite right in the head, Naruto thought. He was too jovial, too happy by half. Even now those golden orbs sparkled with a strange giddy glee, almost as if he were enjoying some great, twisted joke. His smile twisted still further as he sketched a languid bow before them. Why, friends, my name is Tyrian. With a merry giggle, the newcomer straightened and clapped his hands in thin live delight. And when I saw the three of you, I just had to come and make your acquaintance. Naruto noted the strange knives mounted to the young man's wrists with a frown. How so? Yeah, what gives? Kuro growled. Start talking, or start spitting teeth. There it is, that's the look, the one I've been searching for. The young man crooned, rubbing his palms together. It's so nice to meet someone who understands. The three of you are killers, through and through. Just like me. You're not afraid to spill blood. Oh, no, he tittered happily when the trio exchanged an uneasy glance between themselves. With you here, perhaps things won't be so boring for me and my goddess after all. Naruto blinked. Wait, did you say God? Tyrian Kalos, a dark blue, crashed into the madman's back, sending him reeling. I told you not to run off. The energetic man whined. Oh, but Kali, you told me to make friends. Not like this. A dark-haired girl clad in darker leathers regarded them, warm amber eyes in a rueful smile. Naruto had all of instant taken the dark ears twitching atop her head another faunus before she rounded on her victim and gave him a good knock upside the head. What were you thinking? I wasn't. Don't mind him, he's a bit of a spaz. And he's harmless. Well, mostly. With one hand she reeled the wiry man back by an ear. Come along, Tyrian. We still need to wake up Gira and Marcus. Lazy bums decided to sleep in. I'll show them what for. Rather than struggle, the taller student capitulated shamelessly and let himself be led along. As my queen commands, she huffed and dragged him away. I've told you to stop calling me that. Well, that happened. Naruto frowned after the aspiring hunters, idly recalling prophecy he'd been told so long ago. That's gotta be the scorpion. This place is ridiculous. Raven tossed her head, dark hair swaying. First that madwoman, then those two clinging off you, now this. For once, Kuro tried to play peacekeeper. They let us in, didn't they? Raven granted him an angry sneer. Only because that bitch stuck her nose where it didn't belong. I'll be sure to hack it off first chance I get. Kuro swore softly as heads turned in their general direction. Naruto slapped a hand to his forehead and muttered a curse of his own. Best put a stop to that before she said or did something foolish. With a smile on his face and a scowl in his heart, he took Raven by the shoulders and steered her away from the others before her tongue could wag further. Only once he'd drawn her around a corner and out of sight did he dare speak. Don't say that out loud. You don't know who might be listening. Why not? She shrugged him off with a huff, put out by his anger. She's an enemy, one who owes us a debt of blood. That may well be, but don't go shouting it to the heavens. He jabbed a finger into her face and her closed, stubborn expression. We haven't gotten into Beacon yet. His words didn't draw a wince from Raven, but they silenced her all the same. Neither of them wanted to go crawling back to the tribe with their tails between their legs. They'd never live it down. Exile would be the least of their worries. Celus might even kill them for such a miserable failure. Of course, neither wished to admit that. She batted his hand away. You're a coward, and maybe you're too damn hot-headed for your own good. Raven went terribly still. All the blood drained from her face, and for a moment he thought she might draw her blade on him. Instead, she drew herself up, looked him square in the eye, and spat at his feet. Her position made clear, she flounced off with a huff. It was as much a dismissal as anything else. Stubborn bird. She would sooner throw herself on her own blade than admit her wrongdoing. Chasing her now would only stoke her temper to new heights. Worse, he wanted to realize those heights to see just how far she could be pushed before she well and truly snapped. He longed to chase her down and have it out with her, put an end to this once and for all. The kindness in him wouldn't allow it. Maybe Raven was right. Maybe he was getting soft. In the tribe, they would have broken bones over this. Now, rather than pursue, he watched her go a frown. Who put a bee in her bonnet? It wasn't hard to find Kuro, and share that opinion with him. Maybe go easy on her. Yeah, mercifully, the younger Branwen didn't rib him for it. She's having a bad day. A long-suffering sigh escaped him when the blonde refused to answer. Come on, we better find her before she does something stupid. Shaking his head, he turned and stalked right back the way he'd come. He bounced off someone. Hey, watch where you're going. His jaw clicked open. Holy hell, this girl was tall. Nearly as tall as him, clad in a blouse and combat skirt of purest amber, the better to show off her long legs and toned arms. Rich ebony hair ran down her back in curly ringlets, framing a tan face from which eyes of midnight gray shone. A pair of golden gauntlets sheathed each arm to the elbow, sparkling with dust gems near the knuckles and center. She hadn't even felt him bump into her, didn't even notice his presence at all. Perhaps that had as much to do with as he looked on. She finished attaching it to her arm and slammed her locker shut. Kuro whistled. Really, Hazel, she rounded on him with a growl, anger clouding her tan face. You really don't need to keep an eye on Mio. Her words trailed off as she truly beheld him. I'm sorry, I thought you were my twin. He's skulking around her somewhere. Naruto wasn't rightly sure who Hazel was, but if he was built anything like this girl, he wasn't sure he wanted to meet the man. And you are. She smiled at that innocent inquiry, a smile so full of life and light that Naruto couldn't help but grin despite himself. She seemed all right. Gretchen Reinhardt, at your service. She clasped Kuro by the arm and shook him. Nice to meet you as your friend. Kuro didn't quite seem to hear Gretchen. His eyes were wide indeed. I think I'm in love. Marry me. Naruto couldn't help himself. He crashed backward with a wild guffaw, legs kicking at the air. Gretchen's tan face turned 7 shades of scarlet. Hey, excuse me. Mercifully, the loudspeaker spared her further embarrassment. Will all applicants please report to the cliffs for initiation? I repeat, all beacon applicants please report to the cliffs for initiation. And so it began. Everyone was ushered outside to the cliffs in short order and bid to stand upon a series of strange metal pads overlooking the emerald forest. Naruto saw the headmaster awaiting them and wasn't at all surprised to find Yin standing at his side. It stood to reason someone like her would have Ospen's ear. She was more than he'd thought. She saw them and flashed him a saucy wink their way. Raven growled at her, all but spitting sparks. Before them, the headmaster rattled off of a quick speech that most didn't bother to pay attention to, focused on the forest below. For years you have trained to become warriors. The distinguished warrior spared each of them a keen look. Some flinched, others didn't. And today your abilities will be evaluated in the Emerald Forest. Naruto, even a child, could figure that out. Some of the applicants were children. He was fairly certain 1 or 2 of them had to be underage. He spied a girl clad in a white cloak who barely came up to his chest. Tiny little thing. She couldn't have been older than 16 at best, and that was stretching it. She caught him looking and dared a tentative wave. Naruto returned it, feeling like a clod for staring. All right, brats, I know a lot of you are probably wondering about team assignments. Ian stepped up beside Ospen to continue where he'd left off. Well, don't worry, everyone's getting a partner today. A nervous murmur passed through the applicants. Raven spat on the floor. These teammates will be with you for the remainder of your time at Beacon. Ospen rose to the occasion. So it is in your best interest to be paired with someone with whom you can work well. That being said, he continued, the first person you make eye contact with after landing will be your partner for the next 4 years. Kuro gulped. After you've partnered up, the headmaster bowled on relentlessly, make your way to the northern end of the forest. You will meet opposition along the way. Do not hesitate to destroy everything or you will die. Naruto pinched the brow of his nose. But still, the headmaster wasn't finished. You will be monitored and graded for the duration of your initiation. But our instructors will not intervene unless one of you is in imminent peril. His words were a death knell to their hopes. Being rescued by them will, of course, result in immediate disqualification. I suggest you prepare yourselves. To his left, Kuro drew Harbinger. On his right, Raven brandished Omen. Other took head and readied their own weapons. Naruto flicked Prophecy from her sheath. The blade warmed in his grasp, ready for her bloody work. You will find an abandoned temple at the end of the path, containing several relics. The headmaster's gaze was like a dagger now, cutting into each and every one of them. Each pair must choose one and return to the top of the cliff. You will guard that item, as well as your standing, upon which you will be graded appropriately. Without warning, a smile broke through his glacial facade. In the meantime, feel free to use your own landing strategy. Naruto's blood ran cold. Landing strategy. Oh, this boded poorly. A few paces down, Gretchen grinned. Finally, and most important of all, there are a limited number of relics. Ian's words dashed that grin. There's more than 3 dozen of you here today, and we only have so much room in Beacon. So let's set some ground rules. Lovely lilac eyes flitted from one student hopeful to the next, seeking them out in turn. You don't get a relic within the time limit, you fail. You leave the forest without a relic, you fail. Try to cheat and you guessed it, you fail any questions. A few hands rose. In blatant defiance of said questions, Ian raised a remote and pressed a big red button within. More than once. Too bad a peal of delighted laughter filled the air, drowning out the shouts that followed. Ready, set, go. Naruto dropped down on his haunches and tensed his knees in preparation of what was to come. He was not prepared. All the pads went off at once, catapulting everyone into the air in a cacophony of startled cries. Chaos ensued. Doubtless everyone expected to be launched one by one in a neat, orderly sort of fashion. Not this year. Some were unlucky and suffered a short, sudden drop to the forest below. Others collided with one another in midair and went crashing to the ground. And others, WOOOH. Naruto shot into the air with a wild whoop and arrowed into the distance, grinning like a madman. This was it. This was his moment. This was what he lived for. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Tiro hit the tree and swore a bloody streak all the way down. Shit, shit, shit. Ora crackled angrily as he crumpled to the forest floor with a bloodied nose, well short of the others. High above he heard the harsh crack of broken branches and angry ammunition as the others forged their own landing strategy. No help came for him. Raven could cut a portal to him if she really wanted to, but he didn't think she would or could while soaring through the air like this. She was being bitchy. Her head wasn't on straight. No scroll reception call her, either. Beacon really had thought of everything. Against his better judgment, he decided to stay put and wait for his sister to come her senses. Luak Awat. Someone crashed through the canopy overhead. Literally, against his better judgment, young Kuro accidentally looked up. A blur of white and red burst from the branches to dangle by her bootstraps like some kind of mad puppet. Hang upside down, dark hair a halo across her face, a visage which soon turned red as blood rushed to her cheeks. Kuro's mind gibbered. Close, way too close, her nose brushed his, a bright pair of familiar silver eyes mere inches from his own. Silver orbs met red. The former blinked thrice, narrowed, widened. Summer Rose tilted her head and managed an awkward wave. Little help, here. Kuro Branwen buried his head in his hands. Me and my bad luck. Damn Kuro. Damn Naruto. Damn them both. Raven seethed as she hacked her way through another Beowulf, only to find herself faced with a second. And a third, followed by a fourth, then a fifth. Omen howled in her grasp, its blunted blade cutting them apart like wheat from so much chaff. This was her bother's semblance at work, she just knew it. What else could it be? She'd been set upon the moment she landed, and the Grim hadn't let her be since. She could cut a portal to them right now, but she knew they'd never let her live it down. Kuro might not care, but Naruto after they fight they'd just had. Raven imagined his laughter, his small, satisfied smile. Oh, I thought you didn't need my help. Braving her blade with both hands, she divested an angry Ursa of its head, slashed away at Borbatusk's calves, and whirled into another Beowulf. All the world dissolved into a red blur, and she knew not but the bloody thrill of battle. She became a whirling dervish, ripping and tearing through all who opposed her. Help who needed help, not her. She was Raven Bran. When she needed no one, she'd find the relic on her own and show that bloody blonde bastard who was top dog or die trying. A dark shape burst out of the foliage behind her, jaws gaping wide. Shit, she rounded on the Ursa, already knowing she wouldn't make it in time. The beast froze. Literally, glistening ice crystals burst across its form, rendering it a statue of purest ice. Instinct had her turning, pivoting on one heel to face this new threat. Thanks. Pale blue eyes met red. Willow Schnee blinked back at her, rapier in hand. A soft smile bloomed across her face. You're welcome. Raven threw her head back and howled her fury to the world. RGH. Naruto hit the ground running. Gotta find Raven, gotta find Raven, gotta find Raven. Of course, that was easier said than done. They'd been launched in all manner of directions. He hadn't even seen where she'd touched down. North, it felt like north. All the world blurred by as he ran, reduced to a mottled whirl of brown and green. The stray Beowulf blundered across his path and he smashed through it, leaving its severed halves to crash down to the floor. By the time they dissolved, he was long gone. In the distance he heard the sounds of combat. He actively went out of his way to avoid each and every one of them. Raven and Kuro needed to be on his team. They had to be. He didn't want anyone else. Sure, Gretchen seemed a decent sort, but he barely knew her. To say nothing of the oddball Tyrian or the noisy collie. Not that he had anything against Faunus, mind you. Beneath all the smile and snark, they might be perfectly nice people. But he wasn't about to seal his future with them. Glinda and Willow, nope, all the nope. They'd kill each other if he didn't kill himself first. They weren't family, weren't part of the tribe. He couldn't trust them to have his back, not in the way Raven and Kuro would. You may not have a choice. Blasted voice. He'd been hearing it an awful lot lately. Without warning, the brush fell away and he beheld someone before him. They heard him coming and turned. He saw something. More a blur than a real person. Blue eyes squeezed shut instinctively before he could discern their identity, unwilling to make eye contact. He'd not risk himself. Not a chance in hell. Get out of the way. Hey. Too fast, he flung up his arms in vain and hollered a warning, both unable and unwilling to stop. They wound up in his arms instead. He bristled as something warm and soft pushed against his chest. His hands got a good handful of something they really shouldn't have, and by the time he realized it, it was already too late. His legs were still carrying him forward, and whomever he'd snatched up was too startled to react. Branches and brambles tore at his face, all the while. He knew it wasn't Raven. If it had been her, she would have given him a black eye by now and a broken jaw besides. He hadn't carried her since she was little, and even then it had only ever been piggyback. The memory brought a small, fond smile to his face. It was dashed not a moment later when his current captive began to wriggle and rail in his grasp. "What are you doing?" A new voice cried. "Stop, stop, stop, you're going to hit a tree." Naruto dared to open his eyes a sliver to see their approaching doom. He slammed them shut just as quickly, kicked off a mighty bough and skidded to a halt between its towering roots. Even then he didn't dare open his eyes. Not Raven. Definitely not Raven. As long as he didn't make eye contact, he was safe. His arms locked up, refusing to release whomever it was he was holding for fear of retaliation. The faint aroma of vanilla and honey filled his nose when he inhaled. It wasn't an unpleasant scent. "I beg your pardon," that same, familiar voice spoke softly now, little more a breathy whisper. "But would you kindly put me down?" "Nope." He smacked his lips in a resounding negative. "No can do. Just pretend this isn't happening. Could you open your eyes? At the very least you're being rude." Naruto shook his head. "Sorry, saving myself for someone." His captive didn't take very kindly to that. A sharp inhalation was his only warning. Someone flicked his forehead, bringing with it a sudden starburst of stinging pain. His eyes shot open reflexively to glare at the... Oh, what the hell? Blue scowled into green and all his hard work was undone. Glinda Goodwitch stared back at him with narrow eyes, lidded and intent. Her golden hair was frazzled free and strewn with leaves, glasses hanging askew down the bridge of her nose. Much to his dismay, her cheeks were a pale and pretty pink. Naruto soon saw why. Oh dear. He was still holding her, of course, but until now he hadn't realized just how he was holding her. One arm hand taken up residence under her legs while the other supporting her back like a groom carrying his bride, tucking her breasts against his chest like some dark knight carrying a princess straight out of a fairy tale. The young woman balked at him. Naruto balked right back. His shoulders slumped, even as a spark of anger flared to life in his chest. Eye contact. Blast it. Of all the people for what felt like an eternity, neither blonde moved. Neither blinked. Neither breathed. Quite suddenly, someone did. Naruto set Glinda down and stalked over to the nearest tree trunk he could find. Upon reaching it, he placed both hands against the bark and reared back. He smashed his head against it, repeatedly. "This isn't happening. This cannot be happening. You needn't be rude." Ugh. Naruto pinched his nose and struggled to keep a stoic smile affixed to his face as he walked ahead of Glinda. For his part, his new partner and that just burned didn't challenge him further. She simply trailed in his wake like a silent shadow. Perhaps she sensed his anger. Maybe she felt regrets of her own. It might have been something else altogether. Who could say he wasn't about to test her? Something told him a wicked temper lurked beneath that calm facade and he had no desire to rouse it. "No offense," he murmured as he peeled back a branch for his fellow blonde, "but I was looking for someone else as my partner." "I see." Her brow furrowed and she slipped under his arm. "She really didn't. You're talking about the girl with the dark hair, the one you were with this morning." He grimaced. "Yeah. You do realize you may be able to work with her. Our team isn't complete." "Maybe not, but it would be soon." The whiskered warrior bit back a shout before it could burst free from his lips. Didn't she see? Unless Raven somehow blundered into Kuro, unlikely given his spate of bad luck, and made him her partner, then no matter what combination they went with, he would be forced to go without one of his best friends. That burned. He wanted to be on a team with them. Nobody else. He had nothing against Glinda personally, but he just didn't know her. Trust came with time and proximity, and right now they had neither of either. A distant shout caught their ears. It sounded like Raven. Naruto sighed. "Fine, Simon partner. Let's see if we can salvage this." "Allow me." Glinda withdrew something that looked vaguely like a wand from a holder on her leg. With a wave of her weapon, just what the hell was that thing? The branches ahead of them withdrew of their own accord, pushed away as though touched by an unseen hand. A bystander would have thought the very forest itself came alive. Naruto knew better. He was just about to remark on that when a stray Beowulf burst from cover and bounded toward them, jaws gaping wide. "Watch out." He dove forward, reaching for his weapon. Glinda raised her free hand and clenched it into a cruel claw. The Grim froze in midair with a rasping gurgle, paws scrabbling at nothing. As he looked on, his fellow blonde gave her wrist a vicious twist. All around them, the air shimmered. The Grim did not. It absolutely imploded, showering them with bits of black ash and white bone. Another twist sent the beast's ruined corpse crashing away into the emerald forest. Glinda hummed and flicked a stray strand of shadow from her shoulder. "Shall we move on, then?" Meet." Despite his anger, the wayward warrior found himself whistling as he gave chase. "That's a useful semblance. Telekinesis, is it?" "Yes." Glinda preened but a little over her shoulder, her green eyes hooded in silent satisfaction. "I've not mastered it yet, so it's good for little more than brute force at present. Nothing like yours, I'm sure." Naruto missed a step. "Excuse me, your semblance." Glinda bowled on, utterly unaware of the landmine she'd just trod upon. "It must be a powerful one indeed, for Professor Yin to take notice of you and your companions." The reminder galled Naruto, burning him to his very bones. He winced, and not just for the mention of Yin at that. Semblance he wouldn't know. Raven had her portals and Kuro his luck, but as whatever it was, it hadn't made an appearance. It was something of a sore subject for him, even now. Semblances weren't simply a hand trick to call on in a pinch. They were part of one's soul. They made you who you were. What did that mean then, when he'd not unlocked his no matter what he did, no matter what he said, no matter what danger he threw himself into, it never emerged? Sometimes it felt like it was right there, waiting for him to call on it, but he didn't know how. In the end, he settled for the truth. I haven't unlocked mine yet. Something of his anger must have shown through in his expression because Glinda abstained. Item it. Jade eyes widened behind her glasses in alarm, a faint fracture etching through her stern facade. I didn't mean to offend you. He didn't respond, and anxiety flitted across her face. And now you must think I'm an insensitive bitch with more tits than sense. Naruto blinked. Who is this girl and what has she done with Glinda? Shit. She spat the word 3 times, each one harsher than the last. I haven't put my foot in my mouth like this in ages. At length she pinched the brow of her nose and sighed. I'm making an ass of myself, aren't I? Her voice slipped but a little, falling into a more rural Valian accent he vaguely recognized. I'm sorry. She pivoted but a little, looking at him over one shoulder. It made her look oddly vulnerable. Can you find it in your heart to forgive me? Naruto blinked, somewhat taken aback by the curse. Maybe she wasn't such a prissy bitch after all. Nah, it's fine. He waved her down. Couldn't help but notice the accent there, though. Sure enough, Glinda stiffened and the sight gave birth to a grin. You're not quite as perfect as you pretend to be, are you? Her face flamed with high color. Can we talk about something else, please? Anything else? Fair enough. Naruto stifled a laugh. It became a snort instead. Let's get going. We're burning daylight. Just ahead of them the brush parted and a frazzled Raven stumbled through, gasping for breath. She saw the two of them and stiffened, back arching in distress. Naruto blinked. Raven blinked right back at him. A pall of silence fell over their unlikely reunion as they balked at one another. He winced, expecting an outburst of anger. Something. Anything. He was not prepared. Save me, Faye. His best friend all but leaped into his arms and climbed over him in her haste to escape her pursuer. Hide me, do something, anything, she's crazy. I beg your pardon. Behind her, Willow Schnee emerged from the undergrowth, angry and flushed. You're the crazy one. Liar. Raven was having none of it. She's absolutely insane. Don't let that smile fool you. She giggles when she kills Grim. She's evil. I tell you, evil. Glinda made a noise that sounded vaguely like a laugh. Congratulations. I think you broke her. Naruto exhaled in a long-suffering sigh. This is my life now. Ahasi and thrashed about on the ground, legs kicking, and howled with laughter. I told you it would happen all according to plan. Quite. Husband arched an eyebrow. You're never going to let me live this down, are you? Nope, she grinned. Not on your life now, pay up, geezer. The old man sighed. This is my life now, it seems. It had been simpler before he'd met her. This is my life now. Someone shoot me. Kuro wasn't sure if he should laugh or cry. Maybe if he repeated the lie often enough it would stick. He might even come to believe it himself. Better yet, none of this could be real. He'd rather like that. Maybe it was just some fever dream, a story penned up by a madman in a fit of wild inspiration. Wouldn't that be a hoot? Yeah, not bloody likely. His fate was sealed the moment he laid eyes upon Summer Rose. Even if it hadn't been, the arrival of those two had cemented it further. What were their names again? He remembered the bigger blonde, if only because the cheeky bastard wouldn't stop running his mouth. Taeyong. Right. He could remember that much at least. At least he kept Summer occupied. Those two chattered enough for the 4 of them. But Tai's companion threw Kuro for a loop. You're not gonna let that joke go, are you? No. Her growl spoke volume. All that anger could fill a bookshelf. Kuro felt his shoulders drop. She was a tiny little thing with tan skin and hair the color of spun gold and short. Very short. She barely topped 4 feet even with those boots of hers. He'd remarked on her size once and she'd not stopped glaring at him since. What was her name again? Rumpelstiltskin. No, Rumpels and Rumpel. That was it. There was another joke to be made there somewhere, but he dare not make it. She would absolutely flay him alive if he went there. All right, this could work. Just gotta keep telling myself that. Really, he was almost grateful when they found the relics first. At least then this farce would be over. Oh gods, Naruto and Raven were going to absolutely murk him for this disaster. Still, it could get any worse, right? No, surely not. It just couldn't. Surprise it could. He had no one to blame but himself. It got worse. Osmond spread his arms before the student body. And with that said, I proudly present these 4 new teams to Beacon. Naruto regarded the room with wary resignation. It wasn't all the large really. If anything, it proved downright cramped for their little quartet. 4 beds did not a large space make, certainly not when 3 girls were involved. If it were just him and Raven, he would have been quite content sleeping on the floor, but here there was a very real chance of being trod upon. Even if he didn't, they would all but trip over one another to get anything done. Unfortunately, there was another pressing matter that demanded his attention. Why is everyone looking at me? You're in charge. Glinda adjusted her glasses, prim and proper once more. The headmaster did name you the leader of Team GRWN, after all. Where should we begin? Questioned. Naruto's hand shot up. How in the hell does a G spell crown? Glinda looked away. Well, it was better than brown. Or sun. Willow chimed. That's been done. Raven shrugged. It could have been green. How would that even work? Osmond had chose the team names, so he supposed there was some method to his madness somewhere, but really, it wasn't fair. The other 3 teams, one of which contained Kuro at last, had proper monikers given by the letters of their team. STRQ, GMBT, HNGV, that sort of thing. But GRWN really, what had he been thinking? Maybe it was better to let teams choose their own names now, that way lay madness as well. No matter how you sliced it, none of them were happy with their given title. At a loss, Naruto cast his gaze about their dorm. So at now we're not going to be able to move around like this. Willow looked to him patiently. I'm fine with whatever you decide. Raven tore her gaze away with a huff. Of course she is. I'm sorry, did you say something? No, not at all. There it was again. That feeling. They were all looking to him for guidance, barely a team for 5 minutes, already expecting him to make decisions. He didn't much like that. The mantle of leadership wasn't one he'd asked for, rather, one he'd had thrust upon him. He didn't want the onus of responsibility. Aspen argued he was the only one fit for it. Why Willow and Glinda could be perfectly competent leaders. Raven, he could see why she'd not been chosen. She'd be leading them on raids by the end of the day. Which still left the matter of their room. He couldn't avoid it any longer. At a loss, he tossed out the first word that came to mind. Bunk beds, he ventured. Maybe that would give us some more room to maneuver around here. Bitchin'. Raven slammed a fist into her palm with a grin. Bunk beds it is. Oh, Willow perked up. I have some rope in my pack, let's use that. Glinda quirked a brow. I suppose I could utilize my semblance. Everyone went mad. What followed was a mad blur of dust, semblances, and improper construction. Beds rose and fell. Posters went up. Books slid into shelves. Weapons were stored into racks summoned by one of Raven's many portals as the 4 of them flitted to and fro. Raven laid claim to the leftmost bunk by right of conquest, and Naruto pounced upon the one below it, leaving Willow and Glinda to choose the remaining beds at their leisure. Voices were raised in discussion, even argument, but no weapons were drawn, nor was blood shed. Somewhere in the madness, Naruto realized he was smiling. He watched the 3 of them squabble and smiled as laughter spilled out into the hall. Well, it wasn't as bad as he'd feared. Not bad at all, really. Did you need something, old man? Aspen's hand smacked against his forehead with an audible pop as an old friend plunked down on the corner of his desk. Old man, boss, pain in my ass. Yin's nicknames were a dime a dozen these days, and by the gods, did she relished needling him. Even after all this time, he'd never grown used to her passive-aggressive behavior. It irked him, infuriated him, calmed him. He wasn't sure how to feel about that. Her mood seemed to shift with the seasons these days. In hindsight, that might be his fault. Yin had been under a fair bit of stress lately, thanks in no small part to the task he'd given her. Or rather, the onus she'd placed upon herself. Here in the sanctity of his tower, they could speak freely without fear of anyone overhearing them. It was a rare opportunity. Such a shame they had to sour it with such foul news. There's been a murder in the dorms. Atop his desk, the blonde brawler went curiously still. Aw, crap. She leaned back and pinched the brow of her nose. Don't tell me it was one of the kids. Worse. He slid a photo across the desk. 4 faces stared up at her within. A third-year team. Another photo joined the first. Ian peered down at the worn picture with a sigh of her own. Team SLVR. Her metal fingers traced a face. 4 bastards. How did they die? Aspen looked away. They were strangled to death in their sleep. Lilac eyes burned with pale flames. Is that so? He had to ask. Do you have any idea who it might be? She finished his sentence with a sigh. No, I don't. Never knew them in my day. Not sure if that's a good thing. And you're certain of this? Future, remember, she tapped a head to her skull. Salem didn't start a murdering spree on my watch. I would have seen something like this in the news. No, the blonde brawler shook her head. I don't know what this is. It could be something new. Her shoulders rolled in a slim shrug. Could be it happened in your time. Or not. Dunno. A silver brow quirked. You are being awfully blasé about this. Kinda have to be, old man. I'd lose my mind otherwise. That was the crux of the matter, wasn't it? Time travel was a dangerous thing. An impossibility, some might say. The young woman sprawled across his desk wasn't Ian at all, rather, it was an alias she'd taken for herself. Her real name was Young. She'd not given him her surname for understandable reasons. Wouldn't do to erase herself from existence, after all. And so a woman out of time and a man who could not die joined forces. At first, he hadn't wanted to believe it. He didn't at first. In the end, reality convinced him, that in ruthless pragmatism. Young simply knew too much, and with that knowledge, answers Jin couldn't possibly supply. The relic of knowledge could speak of many things past and present, but not the future. Everything this young woman said had come to pass. The Branwen twins came to Beacon. Summer Rose, a girl with silver eyes, was even now walking these hallowed halls. She had found for him other warriors of repute, even another silver-eyed warrior he'd not known of. To think, the Grim Reaper actually existed. Yes, Young was his ally, if nothing else. She'd then gone out of her way to recruit those whom she claimed would be enemies in the near future. Others were allies, or at least she swore they would be. Aspen wasn't entirely certain if that was a good thing, but he trusted her judgment. Thanks to her, the ranks of Beacon and the other academies swelled with future huntsmen. All the while Salem had been strangely silent. She'd not steered him wrong thus far. And your parents are here. Definitely. She winked. Can't really say any more than that. Still wanna exist, you know. The immortal steepled his fingers. And you believe you will despite all the changes you've wrought. Or are we doing this again? She sat up with a growl, flames flickering from her eyes. You already know my story. Lilac orbs narrowed upon him anew. Salem took everything from me. Her fingers creaked ominously against the desk. My mother, my sister, my team. You know what we had to give up for this second chance. He did, and chose not to press her on it. I could have gone anywhere, instead I came to you. Her finger hit out against his chest, pushing against his scar. Because I trusted you. That metal digit dug in, pressing painfully against his skin. Because Oscar trusted you. You do realize I still have no idea who that is. Yeah, try dying in a decade or two. She flicked his forehead, drawing a wince from him. I guarantee you'll wind up as him. Until then. Yes, I know. He shooed her off his desk. We've work to do. Off you go. Class will be in session soon. And the incident. I'll have Maria and Oobleck look into it. He promised her. Right now, you're needed here. TCH. Spoil sport. Young sat up with a sigh and sauntered back to the elevator. Fine. Twist my leg, why don't you? I'm going. She had altered things, to be sure. This would work. This could work. She was already so much more than she'd been now. Her skills were sharp. The power was safe with her. Perhaps it had been a cruel thing to replace an old maiden with a new, but he saw it as mercy. In her hands, the might of fall would never fall into the hands of the enemy. Wait, oh gods, he was making puns. She'd infected him. Regardless, now that he knew what was to come, he could and had make preparations aplenty. This was but another. Miss Young. She paused, one foot in the door. Do be careful. Our enemies have been quiet. Too quiet. You are our fall maiden after all. Which means, lilac eyes flashed with fresh flame. Yup. When Salem wants this power. Now it was Osmond's turn to interject. She will come for you, of course. She has to. She must. Young ground her metal fist against an open palm. Her smile reminded him of a sunny dragon. I'm counting on it. Salem scowled. The girl knew too much. Time and time again she'd intervened. Time and again she'd taken useful allies from her. Perhaps it was time someone remedied that. Merlot. Yes, my queen. Bring me one of the prototypes. Time for class. Naruto creaked an eye open in bed. Nuo. Your team leader. Thin hands pulled at him. Get up. He buried his head under a pillow. You be team leader, let me sleep. By that argument alone, it promised to be a memorable day for Team Crown. And no, Naruto still couldn't get over that name. He was petty like that. His sleepy mind clung to such thoughts as he curled up under the covers. Why Osmond had gone so far as to name him the leader over Glinda, he had no idea. At this point he was sure the old man was doing it just to mess with the lot of them. It couldn't be anything less than deliberate. Or perhaps this was Yin's doing. She struck him as a meddler. That one certainly wasn't afraid to bend the rules when it suited her. Really, it was high time some gave her a taste of her own medicine, maybe even a proper pranking. Rise and shine. Our Naruto yelped as reality snapped back because Raven ripped the blankets from his grasp, exposing his warm body to the bitter chill morning air. Bereft of balance, he tumbled to the floor in a tangle of arms and legs, hissing furiously, cold dying. Glinda rolled her eyes. By the brothers, you are such a boy. Oddly enough, Raven tossed her hair. On that, we agree. Get dressed already. Naruto craned his head in vain, hoping to find the last voice of reason in the room. Instead, he discovered an empty cot where Willow should have been. His right eye twitched. Traitor deserting him in his time of need. Wait, where's Willow? Glinda quirked a brow at him. She got. Oh, his heart fell, then rose again as he felt a curious tugging sensation against his chest. He looked down. Why is there a note taped to my chest? Frowning, he plucked it from his nightshirt and frowned at the pale piece of paper. He noticed the Schnee insignia in the corner at once. Must have come from Willow's notepad. Figured she'd have her own stationery. She struck him as the type. Under Glinda's baleful glare he plucked it from his chest and read it aloud, for 3 lines of text awaited him within. I'll save you a seat. The others can go hang for all I care. Warm regards, Willow Schnee. There was a smudge of lipstick beside those words. Raven saw it and sputtered. Glinda flushed to the very roots of her hair. Has she no shame? She barely even knows you. Naruto shrugged. If this was a prank, then it was a damned good one. Things were looking up. Maybe little Miss Schnee wouldn't be such a bad teammate after all. Class couldn't possibly be that bad. Monsters, demons, prowlers of the night. Professor Port launched into his lecture. Yes, the creatures of Grimm have many names, but I call them prey. Naruto stiffened. No, surely not. This was a joke. It'd be a joke. It was not. Let me tell you a story of a dashing young lad. Naruto's head struck his desk. Ravens joined him a heartbeat later. Willow, for all her patience, wasn't far behind. To her credit, Glinda managed to last 30 seconds before she succumbed. It's gotta be a semblance, right? Gotta be. Naruto concealed a jaw-popping yawn behind the back of his hand as he stumbled out into the hall. Port weaponizes his voice somehow and uses it to hypnotize people. How else would we everyone fall asleep like that? There's just no way. Kuro snorted. Speak for yourself. Summer made me take notes. Couldn't make heads or tails of anything. Lucky you. Raven bit back a yawn, pausing just long enough to push open a door before she staggered. My head still feels numb. Well, you are pretty dense. Brat, she threw a mean right hook at his head and missed horribly. The younger Branwen thumbed his nose at her. Oh, you wanna go? Do you fine by? Kuro, no, a girl with striking silver eyes latched onto him before he could truly step in it. Bad bird, she's your sister, don't fight. Aw, come on, stop it. Summer, he struggled in her grasp, to no avail. We do this all the time. Raven pounced. Does little Kuro need a girl to fight for him now? Glinda quirked a brow. and suddenly everything makes sense. What's that supposed to mean? Naruto smiled softly as the siblings continued to squabble, much to the consternation of their teams. He caught the eye of a dark-skinned girl Rumpel, was it, and received only a shrug in return. At least she was civil enough. The blonde boy beside her was not. Striking blue eyes met his and glowered at him with such intensity that he found himself forced to look away. The hell was his problem? Reluctantly, he looked away from Kuro's team and returned his gaze. All told, Kuro Branwen looked good. Better than good. Like he'd finally found his place in this wide, wild world of theirs. So too his foster brother looked more alive than he'd been in years. Good for him. If anyone deserved a bit of happiness on this life, it was Kuro. Gone were the dark circles under his eyes, replaced by a cheery grin. His telltale slouch was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a spring in his step. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen him this chipper. If anyone deserved it, I get to share a dorm with 2 hot chicks. What's not to like? Naruto winced. Ain't all it's cracked up to be, let me tell ya. Kuro concealed a smirk as they reached their destination. Alright, new bloods alright, maybe not so chipper after all. Because they all knew that voice. Welcome to combat class, otherwise known as the meat grinder. Step right up. Who's the first victim? A collective groan passed through the first years as Miss Yin strode out onto the stage, grinning from ear to ear. Arms raised high, she seemed to bask in their suffering. Chicky witch. He was just about to fling a taunt her way to that effect when he noticed something, or rather, the lack thereof. Blue eyes fluttered in a rapid blink. Once, twice, thrice. Yin was missing her right arm. Oh, she had a fair prosthetic there to be sure, all black and gold painted over the metal limb, but actually seeing it up close startled him. He'd not noticed it before. How it seemed impossible to miss. She didn't so much as bother to hide her injury. If anything, she seemed to bask in it, uncaring of the curious stares that passed over. It didn't last. Yin caught him staring and quirked a brow. See something you like? Kuro groaned. Raven joined him. We lost to a cripple. You bet. Her grin grew. And since you're so damn gung-ho about it, why don't you come on up? It grew to shy-dating proportions. Her eyes roved over them. All 4 of you. Step right up, Team Crown. The false fingers of her metal hand crooked their way. Let's see if you deserve that nickname of yours. Naruto's smile fractured. Devil, she's an absolute devil. I heard that. Whiskers. Yin rounded on him. Just for that, you get to face Let's see how your team can fight Geras. She placed 2 fingers to her mouth and whistled sharply. That'd be you, Team Gambit. Step right up, would it kindly? It wasn't hard to miss the eclectic bunch. 3 faunus and 1 human tended to stick out like a sore thumb. And oh dear, the scorpion over there looked like he wanted blood. Was Kuro's semblance rubbing off on him? Said Branwen gave him a hearty slap on the back to spur him forward. Good luck. Willow met him there with an elbow. We'll follow your lead. Naruto stabbed both hands into his pockets and tried not to sulk. He failed spectacularly. What does that make you, my second or something? Raven all but squawked. Hey, I call bullshit. What? You told me you didn't want it. They're sneapreened. I'll do my best to uphold this honor. Raven seethed at her back as their opponents entered the arena opposite him. Something told him they'd be bitter enemies or fast friends by the end of this. He wasn't sure which. At least Glinda appeared calm enough she'd not said a word since. Naruto took a deep breath for calm. Right. Orders. He could do this. Glinda, his gaze flicked to his fellow blonde first. You'll play support with Willow. Raven and I will handle offense. Is that wise? Good witch adjusted her spectacles. From the look of them, Team GMBT is comprised of close combat fighters. All right, runts. Naruto didn't have a chance to answer because Yin stirred the pot. Winner gets an automatic pass on the first test. Team GMBT perked up. Tyrian tittered. Nothing personnel victims. Yin whistled. Ready, set, go. Just like that, the battle was joined. Everyone went mad. Raven Dove left. Willow went right. Glinda leaped back. Unfortunately, that left Naruto standing squarely in the middle. Hey, the baffled blonde barely had time to raise an arm before Gira was on him. Prophecy snapped up, interposing itself between him and the towering faunus, to no avail. He batted it aside like a stick, regardless of whether Gia had a weapon or not, and it didn't look like he did his opponent. Didn't bother to use anything other than his claws, just pure brute strength. It was nearly enough. Calloused palms closed around his sword, utterly uncaring as the edge bit into his aura. Gira bore down on him in spite of the minor injury, trying to tear the weapon from his grasp entirely. Rather than drop his weapon and retreat like any sane individual, Naruto dug his heels in and braved his blade with both hands. Even then he found himself bent backwards, spine nearly parallel to the ground. Nothing personal, friend. Golden eyes met blue as he pushed him, but I'm afraid you're going to lose this fight. Naruto twitched. Yeah, about that. Blue eyes shimmered with the faintest hint of red. He never noticed. In a single seamless movement he took his hand from Prophecy's edge and reached down to his belt, grabbing the thick sheet there. Then he jabbed it in Gira's face. Aura crackled dully as hardened leather and steel met flesh. A thin line of blood ran down Gira's forehead. The faunus barely batted an eye. Is that all? Naruto's smile was all teeth. Not quite. With that, the seemingly silent scabbard produced an ominous click, the telltale sound of dust's round sliding home into the chamber there. Before his very eyes the sheath unfolded and began to gain mass. Segments clicked and whirred. Too late, he realized it wasn't a sheath at all, but something much larger. Naruto's finger found the hidden trigger and hooked within it. light built at the back of a freshly formed barrel, silhouetting a fox's grin within. Say hello to my little friend. Ira swore. She banged. Prophecies cannon sheath barked once, twice, thrice. Each sound produced an awful crack and a blinding flash besides. It never occurred to him that he should let go of Prophecy's edge and retreat. More fool he. Naruto had been well prepared for it and closed his eyes well ahead of time. Ira wasn't so fortunate. Aura protected you from dangerous wounds, but it did nothing to negate sheer impact. You still felt it. At the end of the day, pain was pain. 3 cannon blasts between the eyes was akin to taking a hammer to your face and a brick besides. That shit hurt. Ira's reserves might be stronger than most even, but everyone had their limits. So did he. A low groan greeted him. But the cheating. Face singed and eyes spinning, the poor faunus released his blade and toppled like mighty oak. Aura in the red yin crowed from the sidelines. You're out. Out cold, more like. Naruto nudged him with his boot. Ira wouldn't be getting up from that anytime soon. Sorry. Naruto stepped over his stunned form and stalked into the melee. We're here to win. The cries of combat told him Raven and the rest had likewise engaged their opponents. Warmed his heart, that did. Not even a team for a day and already they were proving themselves. For all their plots and plans, no one on Team GMBT had considered that those of GRWN would have a plan of their own, let alone the sheer disparity in their skill set. Tyrian crashed backward with a yelp, parrying wildly as Raven harried his every step. Omen was a red blur in her hands, ever seeking his vital points. Willow was likewise engaged with Marcus, her own weapon a whirl of light. At a glance it looked to be a strange cross between a fencer's blade and a dagger, not quite a sword then, but not a rapier either. Its edge sparked with dust, weaving torrents of ice where it struck, be it flesh or ground, keeping the agile fighter at bay. One arm was already a frozen hunk of ice, hanging limp at his side. She needed no help there. But where on earth was Glinda, and why was there so much smoke? A little help here. Kali went stumbling past with both arms flailing, armor scuffed and face positively peppered by debris. Her weapon was nowhere to be seen. All too easy. Naruto took pity on the poor girl and gave her back a gentle nudge as she swept by. She stumbled as his hand slapped between her shoulders, lost her balance, crashed down to her knees. A buzzer rang. Ian's hand swept down mercilessly. Out. Only a step out of the arena. No fair. Her hand slapped at the mat. They ganged up on me. Tough. Their instructor sang back. Be aware of your surroundings next time. Glinda flicked her crop once with a smile just shy of smug. All's fair in love and war, dear. Right, then. Naruto collapsed his sheath and gripped hilt blade with both hands. No point holding back now. Time to break out the gig guns. He reached around it and squeezed the trigger located just below the guard and handle. With a whirring click, the whip sword thickened, segments lengthening and condensing into something else altogether. What was once a simple sword became something altogether larger. Jets flared just below its new base, threatening to rip it from his grasp entirely. Raven, he barked. Portal. A crimson tear opened before him and he whipped Prophecy through. Her evolved semblance really was absolutely broken when it came to fights like this. Tyrian looked positively startled when he found himself face to face with a rocket-propelled claymore. He tried to duck, sway out of the way, something. Anything. Under any other circumstance he would have gotten away clean, had not Raven seized him by the tail. She turned his lunge into an aborted jump, one that left him wide open. Prophecy caught him right in the ribs, denting his aura. She released him and he shot away from her at speed to slam into a terribly unprepared Marcus. Both boys went sprawling with a shared shout, tangled up in one another. Willow. She reacted accordingly, her weapon flicked out and an ebony glyph burst into existence beneath Marcus and Tyrian alike, lifting each from the floor. Glinda soon joined hers and kept them there with her semblance, much to their great chagrin. There could be no more tempting target. Naruto pounced, snatching Prophecy up from the floor as he ran. Raven was only a beat behind, grinning from ear to ear. Red and blue blades descended. The last of Team GMBT didn't land out of the ring. They flew, struck the hard light shields, and slid to the floor in a miserable heap. A klaxon blared once, sealing their fate. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner. Give it up for Team GRWN. Polite applause ran through the arena. Naruto preened a little as he spared a glance for the screen detailing their aura meters. Not a single member of Team GRWN had gone below the green. Naruto, missile incoming. We won. Raven flung herself at him with a laugh, shattering his thoughts. He stumbled and caught at her as best he could, even as slim arms flung themselves around his neck and her head hit his chest. She buried her face in his coat as her long legs lifted into the air. When she nuzzled her head against his shoulder, unable to her childish grin. Ha, that'll show him. Well, somebody's happy. Raven dithered for a brief moment, perhaps realizing what she'd done in her exuberance. Her eyes swept left, now right. Then she darted and like her namesake. Warm lips alighted upon a whiskered cheek. Yin whistled. Kuro absolutely gagged from the sidelines. Willow hummed in quiet appreciation. Naruto is of a lesser mind on the matter. Blue eyes buelled. What? He coughed once with red cheeks. The hell was that for? Making a statement. With a dark look at Glinda and Willow alike, she touched one hand to her sheath and flounced away. Her hips swayed in a manner that just had to be deliberate. Naruto refused to believe anything else. A rueful smile touched the corner of his mouth as he watched her go. Wow, didn't know she had a girly side. We really kicked butt. Glinda coughed into a fist, drawing his attention away from those swaying hips. I believe you're forgetting something. Well, it was a team effort. He scratched the back of his head. You were both great. Especially you, Willow, she beamed beneath his words. There was an awesome setup there at the end. A low growl put paid to those words. Uzumaki. Naruto pivoted and found Gira Belladonna stalking towards their way, hands clenched into fists at his sides. His expression was nothing short of thunderous. Bugger. The blonde blanched a little at the look of sheer fire in the young man's eyes. He wasn't sore about that loss, was he? Surely not. He'd won fair and square. Gira, no collie, tugged at his arm, to no avail. Don't be a sore loser. He totally was. Willow bridled, but held her ground, and Glinda with her as the two men stared one another down. Abruptly, Gira's stormy expression softened. An excellent match. I wasn't prepared to face you, and you took full advantage of it. He offered a large hand, fingers splayed. Well played. You won't catch me with the same trick next time, however. Naruto blinked, frowned. He didn't sense so much as an iota of anger in the man. A smile bloomed across his whiskered visage and he reached out to clasp his hand. Right back at you, big guy. Ouch, strong grip. Never thought you'd go for my sword like that. Took guts, and a pit of pain. Gira revealed his ravaged hand, still red and sore. Then again, I didn't use every tool at my disposal either. Naruto nodded. Fair. Was he talking about a weapon of some sort, his semblance? Perhaps did he even have one? What was it? Regeneration, strength, his mind whirled, trying to assess it, and failing utterly. Blasted secret. He enjoyed any mystery as much as the next chap, but that made him want to solve this one all the more. Saw friends, he asked, apropos of nothing. A low laugh rumbled in Gira's chest. So long as you don't shoot me in the face again. That was glorious. Tyrian crashed down on Raven's shoulders not a yard, startling the sulky bird and the rest of them alike. For a moment there, I thought I was going to die. He squeezed her tight. We simply must do that again sometime. Needless to say, Raven went absolutely berserk. Get off me, you lummox. Never, he sang. I'm in love. Sorry about him. Kawi sighed. He's always like this. You get used to him, sooner or later. I'll fetch him. Glinda flicked a glance at Naruto. I sympathize with your plight. He flipped her off. Oi, stuff it, good witch. No can do, sir. All across the rings, others were making amends of their own. Now bad, schnee. Marcus lifted his chin just a hair as Raven finally thrashed herself free. You really smacked me around back there. Indeed, Willow preened. You were quite capable yourself. I nearly didn't see through that awful trick of yours. Naruto felt his right ear twitch. Trick? What trick? He hadn't seen any such trick. Another mystery to solve in this strange place. And was Marcus blushing? He was. Willow wasn't paying a lick of attention to him, but even he could see the admiration in those gray eyes. Nope, not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Thankfully, Raven was quick to save him when she slung an arm around his shoulder. He all but leaned into it. I say we celebrate. Glinda quirked a brow. What did you have in mind? I'm game. Willow flashed a pale gleaming card between her fingers. What say we hit up Vale? Raven nearly fell back on her arse. Holy crap, is that thing platinum? How much lien do you have on that? Not bad, runts. Naruto stiffened as a familiar voice fell upon them. That last move reminded me of an old favorite of mine. Naruto quirked a brow. Which one? This. Quick as a flash, Ian was upon him, grinding her knuckles down against his head. He struggled to no avail. Let me go, you crazy witch. Not a chance. You're so cute like this I could just eat you up. He growled at her. I'm gonna beat you up if you don't stop doing that. So you can work together after all. Her lips brushed the outer lobe of his ear in a low growl, cutting his rant short. Good. Remember this feeling. Her words chilled him to the bone. Wouldn't want you die now, early now, would we? Why? Before he could inquire further, she gave him a shove and sent him stumbling toward his fellows. You know what? His fellow blonde quirked a brow and placed her metal fist upon her hip. As a reward for doing so well, you're excused from class for the rest of the day. Naruto's brow shot straight up to his hairline. The rest of the class erupted. What? That's not fair. Can't give them special treatment. Can him have my class, my rules. Her shy-dating grin said otherwise. That's the way it is. I know, she temporized with a raised hand. I'm an awful teacher. Don't give a shit, you know. Hey, Naruto's brow furrowed. That's my line, don't go stealing it. Ian regarded him with a small, sad smile. Tough. Naruto Raven called to this back. Forget about her, we're leaving. Coming. With one last glance over his shoulder. Neither noticed Ian's longing stare as they left. Well, she muttered, I've created a monster. Still, so long as they live. Right back to work. Tossing her head from side to side, she rallied and pivoted to face the rest of her victims, students. Definitely students. Not victims. Nope, not at all. All right, maggots. She slapped a fist into an open palm. That's round one. We've got 2 more to go. Suo, let's see how about Team STRQ. Come on up here and I'll give you a lesson you won't soon forget. Hiro all but dragged himself into the ring, looking like a man who was facing his doom. A collective groan arose from the audience. It would prove a trying day. To Team Crown, 3 cans of beer clinked against one another with a hollow clank. Naruto tipped his back and drank deeply, savoring the comfortable buzz that had fallen over his mind. Really, it was the simple pleasure that got you. Why rampage around Vale when they could simply retire to their dorm and have a drink to celebrate? Well, a drink or 2. Or 3. 4. You got the point. Should we really be doing this? Glinda regarded her own can with trepidation. Aren't we a little young for alcohol? She'd been dodging this for the better part of an hour now, and he wasn't having it. But he slapped her on the back. Don't be a party pooper. Her lips pursed into a thin line. I'm not sure. Fine, be what way, will you? He hiccuped once. Well, I'm the team leader, aren't I? The ghost of a smile touched those lovely lips, despite the name. Then as team leader, a swaying finger jabbed her right in the forehead. I order you to enjoy yourself. Think. Yes, sir. With a put-upon sigh, Glinda lifted the kin to her lips and indulged herself. That's the way. Raven slammed a fist into the air and nearly fell off his lap for her troubles. Chug, chug, chug. Gods, he'd forgotten how much of a lightweight she could be when she'd had a fume-heavy bird. She really needed to stop squirming against him. That'll lose some weight, not that he'd be telling her that. Many things he might be, but suicidal wasn't one of them. One did not simply insult Raven Branwen and live to tell the tale. Technically, we're all odd enough to drink. Willow swayed back on her cot with a sly smile. This isn't illegal. Glinda tilted her head just so. Still, we're skirting a line. Oh, Raven snatched up another can and cracked it open. Not illegal? Seems you're not so prim and proper after all. I've had a glass of wine a time or two in my time. The Schnee wrinkled her nose as she drank anew. Veil fair is different from what? Why even come here anyway? Raven swayed a little. Thought you posh types liked Atlas more. Willow wilted. If you must know, I was recruited. I'm sensing a story there. Naruto chimed in. Her face closed down completely. Perhaps another time. Definitely a story there. One she didn't seem keen to tell. Far be it from him to press her for now. Fine, more for me. Raven moved on at once, her fear momentarily forgotten. So long as we're not soused come morning, it's all good, yeah. Easy for you to say. Kuro's weary voice emerged from the leftmost wall. That bitch put us through the ringer after you left. Kuro, you've got the room next to us. Wish I didn't, came the muffled reply. You're all too damn loud. Raven thumped the plaster with her fist. Then get your ass over here, we've got plenty. She was still speaking when the door crashed open. Kuro all but dove into the room head first. A running tackle took him the rest of the way and soon saw him with a kin in hand. Miraculously, he landed with both legs crossed beneath and still managed not to spill a single drop of his newly acquired drink. Felt like watching a master, that. Ah, sweet ambrosia. He slammed the kin to his lips. Come to Papa. Nor was he alone. Someone was behind him, peeking their way inside. They're your partner. And the young Branwen wiped his mouth with a belch. Yeah, that's Summer. She's all right. Naruto looked over his shoulder and frowned at her. Dark hair, darker than dark, with a white cloak wrapped around her shoulders, nearly concealing her uniform. Something pricked at the back of his brain and he began to recall words spoke long ago by an old crone. You have silver eyes. The poor girl sputtered and tugged her cowl down over her face to hide them. Is there something wrong with that divided by? Not really, no. Naruto shrugged. Just making an observation. Buh. Who cared for the prophecy of some wizened old hag? This from the boy who named his weapon. Such a low voice growled in the back of his mind. I swear, I'll never understand your mortalsage knows you don't make any sense. Naruto's blood ran cold. Raven, did you say something? Who, me? She looked up, an arm slung around Glinda's shoulder. Nope, didn't say shit. Odd. Hello, anyone there? Silence reigned supreme. After a moment he gave up and shrugged. Must have been the booze. Probably imagined it. He didn't want to consider the alternative. Kuro Summer's wail cut through his thoughts. Give it back. Baffled, the blonde turned to find his brother-in-arms dangling Summer's hood over her head. How he'd gotten it off her he had no idea. Come on, don't hide your face, we're all friends here. Summer lunged at him. Gimme, not a chance. Come on, don't bully the poor girl. Raven cackled. If you want to get in her pants, say so. Oi. Kuro and Summer absolutely squawked. Glinda made a face. Willow toppled backward with a shriek of laughter and Naruto found himself joining her. Weird voices aside, if this was to be their life for the next 4 years, well, maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. Good food, good fights, good friends, and not a worry in the world. How little he knew. I'm home. Young's hand tightened around the doorknob as she closed it behind her. She pivoted in place with a grin. Welcome back. A soft, almost whispery voice called from the couch. A little girl of 7 years looked up from her storybook. Golden eyes rose to regard Lilac orbs warily. How was your day, Cinder? Lilac eyes fluttered open with a start. Young blinked once, yawned, stretched beneath silken sheets. All right, then. She sighed at the ceiling. Guess I live to die another day. As ever, the whirling fan above held no answers for her. It seldom did. And so she sat up, winced a little as her joints protested. Stop that. Body, you're not that old. Then slung herself out of bed. Bare feet patted against the worn black carpet of her apartment. A pale hand snatched up her prosthetic arm and hooked it into the slot at her elbow. From there she fumbled into a white shift as she made a beeline for the hall. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and winced at the bags beneath her eyes. Coffee and food first, soldier. She grumbled at the sleepy specter as much as her messy hair. Then shower. There comes a time in a warrior's life when they look back on their choices. Everyone reflects upon their actions and their mistakes. Did I do the right thing? They wonder, should I have changed this instead of that? Was it right for me to save him instead of her? Can I save everyone? Should I try it all? Maybe they should all just. Questions like that gnaw at you. Like dying of 1,000 cuts. They'll bleed you dry if you let them. Yang was no exception to this age-old fear. She was simply better at hiding in than most. She'd had years to practice, meddling with the past, altering the present, destroying the future. She felt guilt for each action she made, every day. Every morning she woke up and wondered if she'd seen her last sunrise, if she'd simply fade out of existence for what she'd done. It wasn't a matter of choice on her part, but rather consequences of her actions. The flow of time was a delicate thing, and the universe didn't like its peas mixed with its porridge. If one were to stand by and do nothing, the past would repeat. If she had left things be, let fate run its coursino. Unacceptable. Dad would die. Mom would probably run. Ruby would die. Blake would die. Weiss would die. John, Nora, Tirha, Ren, and not just them, everyone. And so she'd taken a risk. Better the devil you know than the one you don't. Salem would find new pawns in time, but that was just a time. In finding all those who might have served her, she'd delayed her. Not for long, maybe only a decade or two. But it was enough. Time to train up a proper fighting force and take the battle to that crazy witch. Time enough to change everything. Even if they never knew her, the real her, that was fine. So long as they lived. Yang gripped her wrist as she skidded down the steps and slid into the kitchen. She would fulfill her promise. She reached the kitchen and froze. You're awake. As ever, Yang felt that telltale tightness in her gut when she saw little Cinder in the kitchenette. Perched on the stool furthest from her, she watched her as timid squirrel might a hungry tiger. Anger sparked, and for a moment Yang saw that awful witch in her place, not the helpless wretch she'd taken in. She shook her head and banished the vision. In the future, Fall was a monster, a wretched witch responsible for so much pain and misery. But now, she wasn't even 10, 7 at a stretch. Looking at her now dulled that pain. And really, the grim shark onesie she wore did a great deal to make her less menacing. Girl loved her pajamas. Thinking on that helped, and slowly, gradually, that black pearl of anger melted in her chest. Morning, squirt. Sleep well. Yes, a quiet voice answered, lisping only a little. Golden eyes regarded her intently, fearfully, warily. I was bored. Read a little. Yang glanced back, noticing the picture book she had planted on the counter and the distinct lack of food thereof. There were crumbs there, clumsily hidden. A loaf of bread was missing. A golden brow arched. And did you eat breakfast yet? Cinder's pale visage darkened with shame. No. Look, Yang palmed her face. I'm not gonna hurt you. I meant that when I took you out of that awful place. You're safe here. You don't have to steal food. Cinder lifted her chin. Of course she was wary anyone in their right mind would be. She'd only had her for 3 months. Trust wasn't something that could be forged so swiftly, least of all for someone like this. Really, Yang knew she had no one but herself to blame. She'd sworn to undercut Salem at every turn, and when the chance came, she had. She'd seen the opportunity, taken it. Jin had told her all she needed to know, and she'd used that knowledge ruthlessly since. Tyrian would never worship her as a goddess. Hazel never lost his sister. Watswell, she hadn't been able to find him yet, or Emerald's parents yet, but she was certain she would in time. Jin was never wrong. They just weren't where they were meant to be. Yet, Mercury would never be born to an abusive father. And Cinder, the awful Cinder, fault bane of Remnant, responsible for so much death, so much terror, was just a child. Not yet the monster made in Atlas, not that horribly betrayed girl who'd been beaten until she broke. The faint growl of a small stomach pervaded the kitchen. Still hungry? Cinder nodded. Yes. Yang held up a finger. Manners. Now what do you say? Grave golden eyes rose to regard hers. Please, may I have some more? Yang nearly swayed on her feet. Herc must not squeal. Adorable or not, this child had still been her mortal enemy once. Good girl, she said at last. Tell you what, how about I whip us up some eggs? Just the way you like 'em. Eggs. A thin line of drool trailed from the corner of Cinder's mouth, forgotten in her glee. With extra bacon and chicken nuggets. Meat lover, this one. Sure, why not? She patted her daughter's head, caressing her dark hair fondly. Come on up here and I'll show you how to make an omelet. Cinder all but hauled a stood to the stove and perched upon it like a raven, amber eyes fixed on the stove. Yang tried not to smile. She really did. Time was a rare and precious commodity for a woman out of time, and she didn't know how much she'd left. Really, she knew she shouldn't be wasting hers on such menial things. But surely a little bit of kindness here and there wouldn't hurt. If it changed the future even a little, then she considered it well spent. Even if it cost her soul. Her scroll rang while they made breakfast. A mere glance brightened her morning tenfold. Yang stabbed it with a thumb, setting it to speaker mode. Maria, buddy, pal. Her grin was practically feral. Right on time. I need a favor. You're mad. A card came and went. Naruto quirked a golden brow. I think we've all established that, Glinda. Have we? His partner laid another card down on the table. Or have I simply failed to realize the depth of your deviousness? Raven flicked a card to match hers, drawing an aggravated growl from the blonde. Someone's a sore loser. I most assuredly am not. A rare spot of red hit her cheeks. This game is simply rigged. Technically, it isn't. Willow chimed, her soft voice echoing through the library. After all, the objective of Remnant is to conquer Remnant, that is to say, the board, by successfully acquiring control of all 4 kingdoms on the board map. She gestured grandly to the forces arrayed between, eliciting a twitch from the bespectacled blonde. Starting with one region, a player navigates, attacks, and defends against other players who control one or more other regions on the board, using various strategic card-based actions. Willow, I understand that. The Schnee prattled right on, ignoring her. Each player controls and defends a wall, which protects their respective regions, and a conglomerate army for invading other players' walls. Raven is about to breach yours, by the way. Her words had Glinda grinding her teeth. Players also receive specific enhancements based on whichever par remnant they control or their class for that matter. Really, it's quite simple, she sniffed. You just have to listen. I pity your children, Willow. Raven's partner frowned as the jab sailed right over her head. Whatever for, you'll see. All right, Goldilocks. Raven overturned a card bearing the likeness of a snarling beast. I deploy White Fang mercenaries. Now discard your hand and give me 5 cards from your graveyard. With a long-suffering sigh that promised bloody retribution, Glinda discarded her hand and watched as it was snatched up by her foe. Naruto ceded his turn and drew another card. Willow did the same, allowing Raven yet another turn. It wasn't wasted. Red eyes flashed as she summarily drew and laid down another card from her neck. I play Giant Nevermore, and I counter with Adaljanar Fleet. Willow cooed, revealing a face-down card of Eon. Bye-bye, birdie. No Grim Swarm for you. She moved her pieces forward. And I'll just take this land. Traitor. All's fair in love and war. Naruto bit his lip to hold back a smile. Say what you would about Schnees, but they didn't like to lose. Well, that, and they were vicious when it came to board games. Glinda had laid claim to Vale while Willow had chosen the side of Atlas for herself, leaving Raven with Mistral and him Vacuo. Nobody liked Vacuo. Just as well too, because with that move, Raven's forces had been split in half. My dark army. Raven buried her head in both hands. I was going to rule the world. Naruto considered his own hand with a frown. A small part of him considered quitting outright before he thought better of it. Really, the girls were getting into this. Best play it safe, then. It was just a board game for crying out loud. Yet they were treating this like total war. He knew what was coming next. He'd be a fool not to. Glinda's leg nudged him beneath the table. You'll ally with me, won't you, Naruto? Nonsense, Willow huffed. He's going to help me. Vacuo has ever held strong ties with Atlas. Yeah, ages ago. Raven rolled her eyes. That shit doesn't count. Clearly, he's going to help me. We're family, after all. Naruto gulped. I'm in danger, aren't I? 3 pairs of eyes met us from opposite ends of the table, red, green, and blue. One angry, the other smug, and the final pleading. He couldn't help himself. He had to choose between them. That was just how war worked. Anyone who wasn't any ally inevitably became an enemy. That was how war worked. Or was it? An idea dawned, and Naruto slid a card across the table, followed by the pieces behind it. Willow made a noise of confusion. You cannot be serious. You're attacking all of us, Raven guffawed. At once you'll never survive. Agreed. Glinda frowned and adjusted her spectacles. This seems foolish, even for you, and find your lack of faith disturbing. He considered the cards in his hand, plus the one he'd laid on the table, then turned the latter over when Glinda made her move. Also, you just activated my trap card. I play Desert Raiders. What followed was an absolute disaster for them. Nobody cared about the Vacuo faction, but when played by a master, they were devastating. And he did nothing but time to practice in the tribe. Willow wilted first. Raven fell next, her forces already weakened due to a certain Schnee's sabotage. Glinda put up a fair fight, really she did, but it was a foregone conclusion. 9 turns later, he'd found himself on the verge of winning. Really, there was just something about him and the number 9, it just seemed to be a lucky number for him. Naruto stifled a small smile as he watched them squabble with one another, each blaming one another for their impending doom. His team, only a few weeks in and already he'd become Uhat was the word comfortable. There it was. Which begged the question, did he want to go back? Back to the dirt, back to the beatings, back to that rough life without so much as a shred of happiness or comfort. Did they have to? Should they? He stole a glance over his shoulder and contemplated the matter further. Raven might very well want to someday. She'd taken to the tribe's philosophy more than most. But in the end, the choice belonged to them. They were growing stronger every day. Soon enough they'd be stronger than Celus. He wouldn't be able to force their compliance. He certainly couldn't find them if they didn't want to be found. Mistral in the tribe was another world away. In 4 years to grow stronger, To helped the innocent, to protect them, rather than prey upon them. Yes, the choice was theirs. He caught Kuro's gaze across the way and returned it with a rueful grin. There was no real hurry. They had 4 years after all. What could possibly go wrong? You just had to say it. A hand clamped down on his shoulder, hauling him backwards in his chair. There was neither word nor warning for what came next. One moment he was contemplating the future, and the next, someone hauled him back into the present. Azure pools fluttered in a slow, lazy blink. Naruto looked up and found himself starting into a pair of startling silver eyes set in a dark face framed by chestnut brown hair. Really, she looked rather familiar. He tilted his head just so, not quite comprehending what the stranger wanted. Who was she? A teacher or something? She certainly looked old enough to be one, yet the stern scowl of her face promised nothing short of murder. Raven saw it and surged upright, only for a sweep of a kick to send her sprawling into the others. Can I help you? Cheeky little thing, aren't you? Naruto's would-be killer glowered at him. Yes, you can. The young woman's scowl became a bloodthirsty grin. Prove yourself or die. His brow furrowed. I really don't see what I have to prove to someone like Yae. A scythe slammed down on his face. He caught its bladed edge in one hand. Blood bubbled between his fingers, and distantly, ever so distant, he heard someone shout. He stood slowly, dragging the hooked weapon up in one hand, rising to loom over his aggressor with his full towering height. Silver orbs widened up at him. Well, damn, she didn't tell me you could do that. Naruto growled. Blue eyes flashed red. Then he moved. Clenched knuckles barreled into Maria's face and hurtled her through a wall. All right, Miss Maria. He cracked his knuckles as he stalked out into the aperture after her. Just remember, you wanted this. You're smiling, yawn. Am I? She hid her smile behind her flask. Whatever gives you that idea. Ospen frowned. At least Yang assumed he did. It felt like he was frowning. He was a frowner. Even with her back to him, she could feel the immortal's gaze drilling into her shoulders. Silly Ospen. If a stern glare was enough to mollify her, she wouldn't have come to the past in the first place. Still, she made a point of not looking at him as she watched the chaos unfold below their tower. Old habits died hard. Oz might not be Oscar yet in this timeline, but it was all too easy to see him as such. All too easy to remember his body, beaten and broken at Salem's hands with all the others. Whoops, there was the depression rearing its ugly head again. Nothing a little alcohol couldn't solve. She took another drink and sighed as the whiskey warmed her belly. Ospen tried to speak, only be silenced by a raised finger. Very well, keep you secrets. Meanwhile, her erstwhile ally slumped behind his desk. But at least allow me to guess. This wouldn't have anything to do with the commotion Miss Calliver has been causing now, would it? Another swig came and went. New, Yang, here at last she turned to look at the headmaster, just in time to see him steeple his fingers and lay his chin atop them. She's been at this for a week. Of course she is. I told her to do it. She hummed happily to herself as the Grim Reaper crashed out a window, caught herself on a nearby ledge and hurtled back inside. At least his reaction time's getting better. He can actually fight her on even ground now. I need Maria to investigate those murders, not run pell-mell through the halls harassing unsuspecting students. Well, she took another long draught from her dented flask, Uncle Kiro's flask, and traced the worn metal as she considered her response. I wouldn't call it harassment per se. Think of it as intensive training. A distant blast rattled the world, accompanied by a low roar. Why-I-I-I-in. Ospen frowned. That sounded like Naruto. Yup. Yet a third sip followed. He's the key to all this. Gotta make sure he grows up big and strong. His brows knit together. You do seem rather fixated on him and Miss Branwen. A bead of sweat ran down her brow. Deny, don't mention Mom and Dad. It's not the combination I hoped for. She swallowed her thoughts, but it works. So long as they become strong. She wrinkled her nose as the weight of her words caught up to her. Ugh, now she sounded like Raven. Mom would be laughing her ass off right about now. See, that's the thing. Yang snapped the fingers of her false arm. I don't have everything figured out. Hell, all my meddling just might erase me from existence. Or it might not. But I'll be damned if I don't try. And she had to, she must. My family gave everything to give us this second chance. Then why go this far? Because my old man made me a promise before he sent me back. That, and here those lovely lilac eyes burned with flames. I'm a spiteful woman, Ospen. Anger coiled in her heart like a bitter serpent, warping her thoughts once more. Salem took everything from me. So, I'm going to take everything from her in turn. She stowed her flask and stepped forward, looming large over him. And when she finally dies, the words escaped her in a feral hiss. When all her precious pawns are gone and her sly schemes crumble down around her ears, she'll know she has no one to blame but herself. She'll have lost to the same little girl she mocked in the last life. She beamed. When we met, you asked me if this was personal. I said it wasn't. I lied. Another explosion rattled the school below. Yang whirled and looked toward the window. Frowned. Wait a minute. Isn't that? Maria Calliver fought like her namesake. For every injury Naruto dealt her, the Grim Reaper dished out 2 more. Life and death were a whirl of motion around her, a storm of steel that tore through his defenses like paper. Or they would have if he'd bothered to defend himself. One did not simply defend themselves against Maria. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. You attacked, or got attacked in turn. A snarl tore out of him as he lashed out and up, kicking her away. Stop already, let me enjoy my lunch in peace. No dice. She came tearing right back in, grinning from ear to ear. He supposed she was enjoying herself. He wasn't. She'd been ambushing them for the better part of a week now, and frankly he'd grown sick of it. Yes, he'd grown faster and stronger for her constant attacks, his instincts sharpened, reflexes honed to a razor's edge, but with each successive strike his patience waned. You think you're hot shit, don't you? Naruto turned his head and spat out a tooth. I'm going to remind you in advance, he grunted as he took her rightmost side to the shoulder and left it here. I'm very sorry and apologize for the inconvenience of me not giving a fuck. His body twisted, ripping it from her grasp. About what you think. This time he disarmed her first and struck again, a low sweep that ripped her left side away, followed by a shoulder barge that pushed her toward yet another window. She ripped prophecy from his grasp as she went, but he wouldn't be denied. He caught her in a fully body tackle, grabbed her by the cloak, whirled, and flung her through the glass. Miss Calliver crashed out the window, performed a graceful backflip in midair. For a moment she almost seemed to hang there, defying gravity itself. Crap, and sank like a stone. A strangled squawk came from the courtyard below. I say, Naruto peeked out over the window. That didn't sound like Miss Maria. Raven's head poked over his shoulder. Suppose it's too much to hope she died. Willow slapped her arm. Don't be rude. Fine. In short order, Team GRWN scrambled down after Beacon's resident psychopath. Their concern was for naught. They found her sitting atop a dazed young man, the latter of which lay sprawled down in the courtyard, eyes spinning in his head. She looked every bit at her ease, stretching languidly atop him. "Thanks for breaking my fall, kiddo." Maria reached down to pat his cheek. Striking silver eyes swept back to them as she climbed back to her feet. "Same time next week, brats. Try to last a little longer this time." "I'll last longer if you stop ambushing me like that. Give up already." Not a chance. She sauntered away with a sway in her hips. Glinda clamped a hand over Naruto's face. "Don't look. I'm not." A low groan came the poor sod she'd landed upon. "A little help here." Naruto sighed. In the end, he took pity on him. Whatever debonair air the young man might have possessed was decidedly dashed by his disheveled state. His once glossy dark hair was a tattered mass atop his head, his crisp suit now a crinkled mess. That pencil-thin mustache curling around his upper lip really didn't do him any favors. He looked like one of those posh Atlas types through and through. Didn't stop him from helping him up, though. A hand clasped his and hauled him to his feet. "My thanks you have, for my timely rescue." There was a bouquet of rose-red flowers miraculously untouched at his feet, somehow untrampled in the chaos. He picked himself up, dusted his clothes off as best he could, and straightened his spine with an audible crack. Aura flickered just so, cracking across his shoulders in a show of pale blue sparks. Small wonder he'd survived Maria's rough landing. Aura could tank a fair bit. Willow jerked back like she'd been scalded. "Jack." Naruto turned, letting go of his hand as he did. "Who, now?" Me word bereft of balance. The poor fellow fell face first into the muck all over again. He caught himself on an elbow and thrashed upright. "Willow, is that you?" She scowled at the young man in turn, keeping the three of them between him and her at all times. "Why are you here?" "Why, I've come to rescue you, of course." Raven scoffed. "Rescue?" he says. "Heh. This'll be good." "Rescue me?" Willow repeated the words, aghast. "From whom?" Before their very eyes Jack Jill snarled. "From all this. That woman clearly seduced you." A lot of them blanched. "Woman? You mean?" Willow hissed softly and shook her head. "Jack, no. We've been over this. She's like a mother to me. She doesn't matter. You have responsibilities." Her brow turned thunderous. "To you or the Schnee family." Jack turned an alarming shade of puce at the slight. "Your father has given me his blessing to be in Beacon." The heiress flicked her fingers, producing a glimmering glyph just over her nails. "Unless he's retracted that in the last few weeks, which I find highly unlikely, I don't much see the point in this. You know his health is poor." "I do not care this," she snapped her fingers, "for my responsibilities. This is my life. I will not be some trophy wife." Raven whistled. "You tell him. No one says you should be such a thing." No, her expression became icy indeed. The board of investors clearly seemed to think otherwise. "Or have you wooed them, too?" He looked away. "That is an unrelated matter. Without you, the SDC cannot function. They have my father. Nicholas has run it quite well. He's run it into the ground here at last." He dropped the pretenses. "Investors are leaving the company in droves. You don't belong here, Willow. You're better than this ilk." Come back to Atlas. When she didn't falter in the face of his pleas, he tried anew. "The SDC needs you. You belong there." "Is it so?" She turned her nose up at him. "And you are you to say where I belong?" "Jack, my life is my own." When the young man opened his mouth to protest, she thrust her blade into it, caressing the inside of his cheek with cold intent. "But by all means, keep talking. One more word and I'll carve you a smile you'll not forget." Naruto frowned. "Do you think we should?" "Nah." Raven waved her down. "She's got this." Besides, Willow whirled and latched onto his arm, startling him. "I'm already spoken for." "Willow, why do you do this?" "I've met someone." She pulled on, heedless of their thunderstruck expressions. "A man I wish to spend the rest of my life with." A blonde brow rose. "First I've heard of this." Jack appeared to be of a similar mind. "So soon?" Raven all but spat sparks. "We wanted to keep it secret." Willow turned a pleading look upon him. "Isn't that right?" She seemed to physically struggle with the word for a moment. "Darling." Darling, wait, was Shio. Oh, realization broke like the dawn, bringing glorious clarity. Willow wanted nothing to do with Jack, but nothing would dissuade him, not even force, so she'd sought another path. He just so happened to be standing squarely on it. If anyone else had been here, then she'd surely have latched onto them instead. Really, it was just bad bloody luck. TCH. Damn him and his soft heart. Damn Kuro and his semblance. Too blasted thing was contagious. Right. He put on what he hoped was a winning smile and put a wary hand round her waist. She stiffened only a little. What she said. His lips twitched a little. "Madly in love." "Yup, that's us." Glinda slapped a hand to her forehead, not at all fooled by this ruse. But Jack was. Naruto could see it in his face, the muscle jumping in his jaw, pulsing furiously alongside the vein in his temple. There it was, the telltale twitch of his eye, something that said more than words ever could. He'd seen that look in members of the tribe before, just as he'd seen what came next. Any moment now. He sputtered, all but frothing at the mouth. "You with this ruffian." Aha, there it was. "I'll thank you not to speak of my intended that way." Jack made a wheezing noise. "You mean to marry him?" Raven lunged forward. Glinda restrained her with her semblance. All the while, Naruto died a little on the inside. This is what I get for helping. He looks like some kind of bandit. Ooh, that accusation was a little too close for comfort. What can you possibly see in him? Must not speak. In the end he didn't have, because everyone took offense for him. Raven bowled forward. "Wanna say that again, bub?" Glinda stepped up beside her. "How dare you?" The gall. Faced with such a united front, Jack faltered. He looked left, looked right, and found no allies. The few students that were out and about didn't bother to come to his aid. Why would they in this timeline? He was only a man. Nothing. No one. He owned nothing. Had nothing. And that was his folly. His gaze settled upon Willow with intent. "This isn't over." She scoffed and made a shooing motion. "I believe it is. Goodbye, Jack." He bridled a little at the very moment he did. Naruto wriggled free of Willow and stepped forward. Glinda and Raven did the same, effectively flanking him while keeping their sassy Schnee firmly behind them. Say what you would about the woman and her machinations, but she was still his teammate. If this little worm wanted to strike her, he'd have to go through them. "Go on," he growled. "Make our day." "No such luck." The man muttered a curse and stalked off. The very moment he was gone, Willow found herself skewered by 3 angry glares. Well, Glinda planted a hand on her hip. "Care to explain yourself?" "I'm sorry." The Schnee heaved a sigh and flung up her hands with a cry. "I panicked and really, it's just for a little while." She stole a glance over her shoulder. "Jack will give up eventually. He always does when things don't go his way." Naruto craned his neck past her toward the man's rapidly retreating back. Even from here he could see his shoulders quivering with anger. He whirled and spared them a vicious look, eyes like twin chips of ice. His mouth moved, and from this distance, he couldn't hear what was said. Not all of it, just a single word. "Mine. That doesn't look like the face of a man who will give up easily." He grimaced as the Jeel stalked away. "I can't pretend to be your whatever this is, not forever." Willow looked up at him and clung to his arm. "Surely it wouldn't be that bad. Oi, at least take me to dinner first." Raven imploded behind him. "Hands off, he's mine." Kuro absolutely whooped with glee. "Aw, you're kidding me. I wish I were." Glinda knocked her glass back with a snarl and slammed it down on the table hard enough to crack the wooden frame beneath. Somehow the glass survived, while the table did not. She didn't know how. Didn't much care for that matter, either. She was entirely too sober for these shenanigans. Hence the drinking. All the drinking. Why wasn't she drinking? Another, she demanded hotly. "You sure about that? Students like us really shouldn't be having any in the first place." When the bemused Branwen continued to snigger, she lifted her crop in warning. "Pour, or I will harm you." All right. Say what you would about Kuro Branwen, but he was a good listener. He also knew when to shut up, and knew when to pour. So, despite his laughter, his hand remained perfectly steady as he refilled her glass with his flask. "Let me get this straight. Just to be clear, this whole engagement thing little Miss Schnee was prattling on about." He crooked his fingers at the aforementioned word. "It's a hoax, right? She's not really, you know what I mean." "It is not." Glinda snatched up her glass and knocked it back. "Unfortunately, it left your sister quite cross." Understatement of the century, that. She wanted no part of that madness and had rightfully left the 3 of them to sort things out while she was away. They could tear up Vale until they calmed down for all she cared. If she had been team leader, perhaps she would have tried harder to corral them. But since she wasn't, nope. Kuro pulled a face as he leaned away from her. Whiskers bit off more than he could chew. Sounds like something he'd do. Across the room, Rumpole looked up from her book. "Kuro, whatever you're thinking, don't. Wouldn't dream of it, Goldie." She gave him an evil look and returned to her reading. "Nah, let him go." Taeyong uttered a jaw-popping yawn as he rolled over in his cot. Best to get it out of their systems, and all that. Not for the first time, Glinda tamped down a reflexive surge of anger. Blast these 3. Blast them all. Beacon was supposed to simple. She'd been recruited by the best of the best, brought up on tales of fame and glory. She thought this academy would be the pinnacle of prestige, the hope of humanity, the one place where she could put her talents to good use. Neon had certainly made it seem so. But they were all mad, all of them, each and every one of them. "He's your brother." She looked away with a huff. "You ask him." "Funny thing, that." A low chortle answered her. "He really ain't. We're not related by blood." Glinda sensed a story there. Curiosity reared up in her heart. No. She shook her head fiercely to stymie it. "I want no part of this madness. They are welcome to have him and be done with that." "You say that." Kuro knocked his flask back, "but I see the way you look at him. Sides, madness is like luck. It finds you." His brow twitched a little as he considered the inebriated girl currently sitting on him. "Whether you like it or not." Summer hiccuped from where she lay in his lap, utterly smashed. "You up?" Kuro leaned forward just so. Glinda found herself mirroring him. "Let me tell you how we met."